So we are thrilled to have her on the panel with us tonight. And she's joining us from her home in Lake Hallie, one of my favorite parts of the whole state. Senator Bernier, good to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure to be here, Susan. Thank you for asking me.
And rounding out our final four is Brian Schimming. He is a Wisconsin strategist and a political consultant. He's also a radio talk show host. You may have heard him on the radio doing political strategy. And he has an organization called Wisconsin Strategies that he just founded. Brian, good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be with this great group on what's going to be a historic night.
It is. It's going to be a very, very exciting night. And Senator Bernier, let's start with you, just because you've walked this walk. Put your clerk hat on for us, if you will, for just a moment, and take us behind the curtain a little bit, and tell us what is going on at this hour right now in clerk's offices across the state. What is the atmosphere like there tonight?
Well, right now, the municipal clerk is working on making sure that all the absentee ballots that have come in during the day, because potentially that could occur, they get to the correct polling place or the central count area to make sure all the absentee ballots that come in are where they need to be so that they can be a part of the total as the poll workers, chief inspectors run those ballots through the process. And so remember that each ballot is a voter, and so the checking the identification and the information through the registration list, and then on to numbering that ballot, and then putting them in the tabulator. It's just like it's a person, only it's an envelope.
Is it, would you call it controlled chaos, or do they have this down to a science now?
They have this down to a science. There's training. And as I understand, the National Guard, who had been trained in April, did an outstanding job. The municipal clerks commented that they did spectacularly. So they have this down pat for the most part. And it's just making sure that everyone is patient and understanding, and that the process is followed, and that is how they're trained, and they do a fine job of it.
Ken, the turnout has been massive today, and the polls are not even closed yet. The clerks have to count far more ballots than they typically do. Can you put that in perspective for us a little bit? How does this election night tonight compare to the numbers of ballots clerks are dealing with as opposed to 4 years ago in 2016?
The biggest difference is a massive increase in the number of mail absentee ballots. In 2016, there were about 135,000 mail ballots that were submitted. The rest of the early votes were people voting early in person. This year, there's been 10 times as many, almost 1.3 million mail absentee ballots, and another, I think, 800,000, 700,000 early in person. And there's a lot more processing that goes on for a mail absentee ballot because you have to check the envelope to make sure that the voter signed it, make sure that there's a witness, all the requirements are fulfilled. There are issues with contacting voters whose ballots have some defects. But the latest figures show that almost 2/3 of the number of voters who voted altogether in 2016 had already cast a ballot, either absentee by mail or in person. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see historic levels of turnout, not just in Wisconsin, but nationwide.
Brian, Republicans and Democrats have been fighting not only to turn out the vote, but to make sure, of course, that each vote is legitimate and counted tonight. What are you going to be watching for, given those historic numbers?
Well, I think to Ken's point, a massive tenfold increase in absentee ballots and early votes. So it's a very, very significant. Wisconsin, there are a lot of states that have probably been ahead of Wisconsin in terms of encouraging early voting. Now, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, all states or most states have been encouraging it. So I think as you look at this vote tonight, it's the models, the model isn't there anymore. The model that we've probably used even as soon as a couple of years ago isn't there anymore. So it's a little bit hard to track. We're also not a party registration state, as some states are. So I think the clerks are doing a terrific job. Everything I've heard here in Wisconsin has been really great. And yet we're seeing pretty good turnout across the state for same day voting here in Wisconsin. So we're probably going to learn some lessons tonight as we go through this.
Francis, how about you? What are you going to be watching for tonight? I know you've been working very hard to help improve the turnout and get as many people out to vote as possible.
So we are very excited because I've worked with a lot of the groups. They've been turning out votes, first-time voters, making the phone calls to make sure that people know what they need to do. And a lot of votes were cast early. That's wonderful. I think out of 100 million votes, absentee ballots that came in, 1.9 of those were in Wisconsin early. And that's very good. To see such a great number of people involved in the democratic process. So we're real excited, and we'll just watch through the night to see the outcome.
Yeah,
result.
That's right. Senator Bernier, is it safe to say, do you think that things are going well so far for clerks, that they've been able to manage and handle the number of ballots they're having to deal with?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I think probably the local clerks were, kind of happy that fewer people were at the polls today on election day, because now they have even more opportunity to execute those absentee ballots that came in. So I did a Google search to find out if there were any problems that were going on in polling places. We are still going to have to be more patient. I have emphasized this, that election night results are never the final results, and that it may take longer to get those results, simply because it takes longer to execute an absentee ballot, especially if the voter didn't do all of the right things on the affidavit envelope, and if they made an error on their ballot and they have to determine the intent of the voter and have to remake ballots. So it's those sorts of things that kind of slow it down. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, they've been working on ballots all day long in envelopes and with in person. So I think they're going to do a fine job. It just will take a little longer with such an extraordinary turnout.
The clerk started counting the ballots at 7 o'clock this morning. Ken, why can't we count them earlier in Wisconsin as other states do?
It's state law that prohibits the tabulation of ballots before Election Day. There were some efforts to try to get the law changed to allow for earlier tabulation, but they weren't successful. And so I think what's working in the clerk's favor is two things. One, the clerks in Wisconsin do a very, very good job altogether. The second is that once the absentee ballot is processed, that the clerks have established that it's an eligible voter, that all the requirements are there, then it just becomes an early ballot, and so it's not as if the election day burden on clerks is dramatically higher than it would be normally. So even though we saw a massive increase in mail balloting, the total number of early votes was certainly higher than it was in 2016, but it wasn't 10 times higher. So I anticipate that there will be, I think, informative results by late in the evening or early tomorrow morning. Especially if what matters in all of this is what the margins are. And if a state like Florida or Pennsylvania, if the election day totals are very, very close, or here they're very, very close, it's going to take longer to to determine who won.
Well, Pennsylvania has a couple of extra days, and Wisconsin was not granted that extension. Why not? Why are we different than what's going on in Pennsylvania?
The major difference is that the case in Pennsylvania involved a case that the state Supreme Court ruled that they could have 3 extra days to receive absentee ballots that came in within 3 days of the election that were postmarked by Election Day. And the U.S. Supreme Court allowed that decision to stand, largely because it was a state Supreme Court decision. In Wisconsin, it was federal litigation from the beginning, and the original order from a federal judge ordered that ballots postmarked that arriving late would be counted, and the Supreme Court overturned that. And so the major difference is in Pennsylvania, it was a state decision to allow late counting or the late arriving ballots, where in Wisconsin, it was a federal judge, a federal litigation issue from the beginning.
And Brian, I know you followed that very closely. What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, I thought it was a good decision on the Wisconsin end because the statutory references here are pretty plain letter law here in Wisconsin. And as Ken pointed out, this decision in Wisconsin was made to extend Wisconsin. The initial decision to extend Wisconsin was a federal court ruling that frankly just kind of made it up out of whole cloth from our perspective. And really, we wanted the courts to follow really what state law, what statutes say, which is that ballots need to be back by the end of the day on Election Day. We thought that made the most sense. We think it makes the most sense generally. And the Supreme Court ended up agreeing. So Ken's right. Sometimes it's in statute. Sometimes you have state and federal level judges making different decisions. But to us, the state level law was pretty plain, and the Supreme Court stayed with it.
Is there anything that you're concerned about tonight that you're keeping a close eye on when it comes in terms of the volume of mail-in ballots?
Well, I think, as was pointed out before, the clerks have been doing, I think, a really good job. But it's a different set of processes and challenges that they've had to deal with, many for the first time. I always favor paper ballots to start with because you want the hard paper ballot. I've never been in favor of digital machines or digital recording. So in my mind, and that's of somebody who's done a lot of recounts, done a statewide recount in Justice Prosser's race, you want everything on paper. But typically in a recount, you'll end up looking at issues like, was the envelope for the ballot filled out correctly? Did it have the voter signature? Did it have a witness's signature? Was it closed? Do individual ballots, is there some question about perhaps what the voter's intent was on the ballot? So to the extent that we see less of any of that, the state will be better off and we'll get a cleaner decision. That is, if we get to the point where it's really close and we have to start looking at all those issues.
Well, we're just getting started, Power Panel. Thank you so much for joining us for this segment, and we will rejoin all of you soon. Enjoy watching the returns at home in your jammies, and I'll be back with you guys right around 8 o'clock.
Gotcha.
So get a cup of coffee for the next hour. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Eric and Charlotte, back to you.
All right, Susan, thank you, and thanks to our panel. Really great to have them on board tonight. Polls will close in a little over an hour now. So far, everything seems to be going smoothly. And one area where we are watching ballots closely is Rock County.
President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence both made several trips to Rock County over the past few weeks. We go live now to Adam Duxter with a look at what to expect in Rock County. And Adam, they may be done counting somewhat early in the night, right?
Yeah, headed into today, we knew there was record-breaking early voting in Rock County, and particularly here in Janesville, where we saw more than 20,000 early votes and absentee votes, and that's why we've seen such a push here today at this single voting location at St. Patrick's in Janesville. To give you an idea, here's a look at all of the volunteers who've been working hard since this morning to make sure each of those votes is counted, and we're actually going to pull aside real quick. Election Inspector Diane Quaddy. Diane, if we could pull you aside for just a moment. Yeah. You've been busy running around since how early this morning have you been going?
6 a.m.
And how has today gone?
Today has gone very well.
Yeah, is it what you expected?
Yes and no. The hard part is it's nice to have it divided into split shifts, but the second shift came in and the first shift wasn't quite ready to leave. And then you have to try to re-educate them on how to do the next group to do it. So it takes a while to get back in sync. Otherwise, it went well.
We've got 20,000 absentee ballots to count. And it's my understanding, so they start here, correct?
They start here in these containers labeled by wards.
Okay. And then where do they go from there?
They go from there to one of the tables. Each table has a ward that they do. And then we give them a ballot box to put the envelopes, the empty envelopes in. And then somebody comes along and picks up the ballots, takes them over to that table until they're ready to go in the machine.
So let's walk and talk over here, because this machine, this is the first time you've been using this in a presidential election, correct?
Right. First time ever.
Tell me a little bit about the machine and what it does.
It counts the ballots and it separates the regular ballot from the write-in ballot from the remake ballots.
Okay. And so it can count some 50 to 100 at a time.
How many does it count at a time, RJ?
It's one at a time, but as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in that short time.
And before this, how would they have to do this process before you had this machine?
We had this little machine down in the end, and we would have 3 of them. And we could only put certain wards in each machine, and each ballot took 4 seconds to go through. One at a time.
So this is truly making the process that much faster.
Right.
And in a year or two where you need it, because you've had 20,000 absentee ballots, and right now, if you can even see the machine, you've counted over 14,000. I mean, how are you at this point in the day compared to where you thought you might be in terms of having all the ballots counted?
We're much farther than I thought I'd be.
Yeah.
You know, I had a good crew. We have 114 people that helped me today at different times. Some came at 6, stayed till 2:30. Some came at 7, stayed till 2:30. Some came at 10 and left at 3 or 5. It depended on what they were doing. A group came in at 1:30 to relieve the 2:30 group, and they'll stay till close.
And you've been here since early in the morning. How late do you stay here?
I stay until everything is wiped up, cleaned up, and all the reports are made. And then when I leave here, I'm not done. I have to go to City Hall and meet with Dave Godek to tell him what worked and what didn't, why my numbers may not be the same, you know, because we found some ballots got in the wrong ward, and then we had to pull them out and put them in the right ballot, right ward, and so that threw the count off.
But in terms of how things have been going today, you're very pleased with so far.
Yes, very pleased.
Well, Diane, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
And I also want to thank Nowlin and Mowat Law Firm, who provided lunch for all the poll workers today, and then a group of former poll workers gave the city money, so we got supper tonight. And I want to thank them.
Well, Diane, thank you for joining us. And I know you guys could see that machine there and truly what it does, but this is making the process so much faster. And with record-breaking numbers for absentee ballots here in Janesville, it's a machine they're really relying on. And I talked to the county clerk just about a couple hours ago, and she says they're hopeful they'll have all of the results for Rock County in tonight.
Yeah, now, Adam, from what you've observed, how has that absentee, we've had so many absentee ballots come in, whether it's Rock County, Dane County, wherever, how has that impacted the lines you're actually seeing there?
Well, we have 5 polling places here in Janesville, and today my photographer Brian Troxel and I, we visited 3 of them. One of them at the old Sears at Janesville Mall had a bit of a line, But what we saw at City Hall and the public library were lines that were almost little to none. And from what we talked to the county clerk, she really says having so much absentee ballots really did free things up for in-person voting. And in a year where you have a pandemic and you're worried about spreading people out and social distancing, that really makes a difference. So she also is very happy with how things have gone today.
Adam, so far things have gone smoothly, but what preparations did police take ahead of time?
Yeah, I talked with Janesville's police chief, David Moore, yesterday, and just asked him, what are you prepared for? And he said, well, we're going to bring in just about all of our staff, and we're going to keep an eye on things, right? They obviously hadn't heard of anything specific, but just really wanted to make sure the polling places were all very safe today. And at every polling place we saw police, not necessarily right there, but in the distance. And I was chatting with Chief Moore earlier today and said, how are things going? Smooth sailing. And he said, just about as good as they could be going at this point. So again, police are satisfied. The county clerk is satisfied. Here at where they're counting absentee ballots, everyone says it's smooth sailing, as good as it could be going so far today.
All right, Adam, thank you so much. Now, through the night, we will be updating everyone on CBS. That'll happen every half hour, and you'll be able to watch those updates here as well. We'll start that in about a minute. In the meantime, here are some of the races we'll be watching tonight.
Good evening. You're watching live local election coverage on News 3 Now. Polls close in just under 1 hour.
There's been a lot of people at the polls today, and so far no major issues have been reported. Madeline O'Neill joins us live in Madison with a look at what's going on as polls get ready to close and how many absentee votes have been counted. Maddie?
Well, we know how long it takes to count those absentee ballots will play a role in how quickly we get results. Here in Madison, they're getting close to counting the record number of absentee ballots cast. As of 4 p.m., nearly 90% of the absentee ballots in the city had been processed, part of an about 72% voter turnout at that time. Workers at poll sites have been processing absentee ballots at the same time in-person voters cast their ballots. In Dane County as a whole, the clerk couldn't give an estimate on how many absentee ballots have been processed, but says some communities are having an easier time than others.
You know, getting through the absentees is a chore, you know, opening the envelopes, getting them in there, so still going to take a while, but overall the voting experience has been really good today.
The Dane County Clerk expects most results will be up on their website by 11 p.m. tonight. Total, he thinks 80% of the votes will be absentee ballots here in Dane County. Charlotte and Eric.
All right, Maddie O'Neill, a lot that, Maddie, thank you. And we've got our crews keeping an eye on the polls all over the state.
Another area we are watching is in Rock County, and that is where we find Adam Duxter with an update on how things are going there, and they're really far along when it comes to counting, Adam.
Well, it's not quite the 80% number that Maddie had just mentioned, but more than half of registered voters in Janesville chose to vote absentee this year, more than 20,000. And where we're at St. Patrick's in Janesville, we've got volunteers who've been spending all day long making sure those votes are counted and tabulated. And right now, they're actually saying they're rocking and rolling. They're cruising. They've counted more than 14,000 of those 20,000 absentee votes, in part because of this machine right here, the DS450, which can count stacks of ballots almost 50 high and sorting them into different categories. So if it's in the bottom tray there, that means the ballot is good and can continue moving on. If it's in the top, they rescan it. But it's partly because of this machine, actually majorly because of this machine. They say they've been able to count more than 14,500 500 of those 20,000 absentee votes right here in Janesville. And again, in Janesville, they're hopeful they can get this number all counted by 10 o'clock tonight. And in Rock County as a whole, they're hopeful by the end of tonight they can have results.
All right, that's Adam Duxer live in Rock County. Adam, thank you. Of course, a number of races we're going to be following closely. Even this one. We're going to follow this one as well. Not sure if you knew that. But all eyes are on this presidential race. 10 electoral votes are up for grabs here in the Badger State as the candidates work to reach that magic number of 270, although the final results of that race may not be known tonight for several days due to the high volume of all those absentee ballots.
Well, so one of the big local races we'll be tracking tonight is 2 MMSD requests. The district wants to spend $317 million on building projects, including improvements to all high schools and a new elementary school. The district is also asking to exceed the levy limit by $33 million over the next 4 years to pay for yearly costs for programming and staff. District leaders have said they know it's a tough sell to taxpayers during a pandemic. We'll keep you updated on how Madison voters decide.
All right, stay with us for continuing coverage. Thanks for staying with News 3 now on this election night in America. Polls are about an hour now from closing in Wisconsin as people are casting the final ballots of the 2020 election season.
We have team coverage across southern Wisconsin on this historic election night. For the next half hour, we'll be checking in with our Mark Kane, who is talking with a panel of election and political experts. And we'll go live to our Madeline O'Neill, who has been at the Madison Clerk's office all night as the ballots are being counted. Let's begin with Mark, who is in the news center.
Charlotte and Eric, thank you very much. As is tradition here on Election Night on News 3 Now, we have assembled our political pundits. What isn't traditional is this year's panelists join us via Zoom. As always, we welcome Matt Rothschild, the executive director of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, and Republican strategist Brandon Schultz. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us again. Happy election night.
On WISC at 7, 8:30, 10:30.
I think we're having a little trouble. Can you hear us, guys? Matt, Brandon? Matt, Brandon, can you hear me?
Yeah, can do.
Happy election night. Thanks for being with us once again.
Pleasure to be here.
Wouldn't be election night without you guys. We couldn't have two different candidates with two different campaign styles. How are things different this year than they were in 2016? Matt, we'll start with you.
Well, I think, first of all, we've seen what 4 years of Donald Trump means. And last time around, people were willing to roll the dice with Donald Trump. And I think some folks think it came up not the way they wanted. So that may be something to look for. People who voted for Trump last time and now decide not to vote for him again. And then Joe Biden is kind of like the Tony Evers nationally. Wasn't a great candidate, not a great debater, not a great speaker, but seems like a decent guy. And, you know, after 4 years of turmoil, people are ready, maybe ready, we'll have to see, for something a little less destabilizing. That's the real question. And so I think it's a different playing field right now. And certainly the Democratic and progressive base is very mobilized. We're seeing that in the turnout. And I got to say, it's great for democracy to have a high turnout no matter how things end up tonight. And I just want to remind viewers that, you know, the polls are open for another hour. They're open till 8 o'clock. All you got to do is get in line by 8 and you'll be able to vote tonight. So that's really important.
Brandon, back in 2016, Donald Trump was somewhat of an unknown. He now has a track record. Do you think that makes a difference?
Oh, sure. Anytime somebody running for public office has been around for a while, people have some things that they can use to make those decisions. But to Matt's point, you know, you're at a point where you see back in 2016, Wisconsin's political landscape was completely different. And to your point, Mark, Donald Trump, people didn't know a lot about him. But Hillary Clinton had never been here. Fun trivia question: who was Hillary Clinton's running mate back in 2016? We'll see who the real political geniuses are, because she spent no time in the state, and therefore there were no expectations in Wisconsin for Donald Trump to come in and win the state. He didn't have to do a lot. This time through, things have changed. He's been president for almost 4 years. He has a record. There's things about him that people like and dislike. The Democrats, on the other hand, have learned from that god-awful mistake that Hillary Clinton made. And they said, we can no longer just sit back and think that it's going to happen. We really have to create infrastructure. And in doing so, they also realized that they had to raise a gob of money. And that started with the Democrat National Convention in Milwaukee, where they had raised tons of money. And obviously the coronavirus killed the National Convention, but it set the stage for raising hundreds of millions of dollars. And what we've seen in this election today, the real difference between 2016 and 2020 is Democrats, and Matt, you are the expert in this. You could tell me if the Democrats have outraised Republicans 3-1, 5-1, 10-1. The fact remains, Democrats have the biggest financial advantage they have ever had, ever, in a national election, in state elections, and all the way down to legislative elections, which we'll talk about later tonight. That's a huge difference in this election in 2020 compared to 2016.
So you can buy an election, you're saying?
Say that again?
You can buy an election?
Well, we're going to find out tonight, aren't we?
Money
As they say, cash the check today, worry about it tomorrow. Isn't that right, Matt?
Matt, how important do you think Wisconsin is to Vice President Biden?
Well, it could be crucial. I mean, if Biden loses Florida, then it's going to be vital that Biden wins Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And so, you know, we may not know the results in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin until, you know, tomorrow. And that's okay. You know, the important thing isn't that we know right away and we get our instant gratification. The important thing is that every vote is counted, and every vote is counted accurately, and that we respect the system. So let's be patient. Let's brace ourselves and pace ourselves. Could be a long night, could be a long morning tomorrow, but we should let every vote be counted and then see how it turns out.
In Pennsylvania, I think they can wait 3 or 4 days before they have to count all the votes.
Yeah, and the votes can, absentee ballots can come in, mail-in ballots can come in for the next couple of days in Pennsylvania. And Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, isn't going to tell us what their absentee ballots were until the wee hours of this morning, tomorrow morning. So we're not going to know definitively what happened in Wisconsin probably until, you know, early tomorrow morning at the earliest.
Brandon, do you think we can trust the polls? I look back to 2016. We sat in this room, and I remember the look on both of your faces as Donald Trump won state after state and being behind in the polls.
And it was over early, too. You know, I don't think the polling industry has done enough self-examination or recrimination on that problem. And it would be kind of stunning if it happened again, if the polls were wrong again.
Yeah, we'll see. I disagree a little bit in that pollsters have had plenty of time to analyze how they, some of them actually got it last time. Some were pretty close. A lot of them will figure out what they had to do to analyze to make it certain. But again, the dynamics of this election are different because 4 years ago, not a lot of people knew Donald Trump, and so there wasn't a lot to go on. This time, they know the president and they know what his issues are and what he's been about. They know Joe Biden. I mean, it's not like these two are, folks that just showed up one day and said, I think I'll run for office. They're well-known candidates and people know them. The question is whether or not voters are answering pollsters' calls. Are they more difficult to complete? And not whether or not they're lying to them. So I don't think you could throw out polling results just kind of willy-nilly and say, here they go. There certainly are outlying polls where some poll says that Joe Biden's has a ginormous lead in Wisconsin. Okay, let's get down to the well done, professionally done research projects. And remember, polls are nothing than a picture at a point in time. They're nothing more than what the results are than when you get it, and they change within a day. So people get carried away with polls when they favor their candidates and when they oppose their candidates. The best polls are always the ones that show you ahead.
Absolutely.
The worst polls are the ones that you're behind, and they, of course, are bogus, conducting by animals. So, you can't overreact too much to what polls tell you, but voters decide races, polls don't.
So what should people look for early on this evening nationwide? What areas are you looking at that might indicate how this election may go? Matt?
Well,
certainly. Go ahead, Matt.
Brandon.
All right. Well, I think you have to break that into two sections. What's going to happen across the country as Donald Trump and Joe Biden look to win the Electoral College and the popular vote? So there's two big issues that you set aside. In those states where U.S. Senate races are critical to Republicans maintaining control or Democrats taking over the majority of the U.S. Senate, those are heavy watchers. In Wisconsin, I think we're certainly all looking to see who's going to win, because if Wisconsin is a battleground state, as some have contended, and our electoral college numbers may make a difference like they did last time. Certainly the statewide ballot and presidential is worth watching. But again, I think Matt and I will watch as we go down ballot and what happens in state Senate and state legislative races in Wisconsin.
And Matt, what are you going to be looking for?
Well, in Wisconsin, I'm going to be looking at turnout in Milwaukee, turnout in Madison. I'm also going to be looking at some of those counties that were Obama counties in 2012 and then flipped over to Trump. I mean, Sauk County and Columbia County, for instance, they were double digits for Obama. And then Trump carried both of those, not by a huge margin, but he carried them. We'll see if what happens in those counties. I think they may be bellwethers too. I mean, nationally, it's possible for Biden to win, even if he loses Florida and even if he loses Pennsylvania. So I think people need to just keep their powder dry here and relax and wait for real numbers to come in before anyone pushes a panic button.
Just looking at the map, the New York Times is calling Virginia for Biden at this point.
Doesn't surprise me. Biden thought he had Virginia. It was one of the ones that he wasn't terribly worried about. I don't know why Trump visited there today, except that it was close to the White House.
Brandon, how important are the down ballot candidates in both parties? How are they going to be affected?
Clearly, each state is going to have a different impact. If you have, for some states that have a U.S. Senate race or gubernatorial race after the presidential slot on the ballot. But in Wisconsin, you jump right from presidential to congressional candidates. And as we know of our congressional delegation, Congressman Kine had a bit of a race, but I think for the most part, the rest of the congressional delegation was okay. So that means you go right from presidential, essentially congressional, and then down to state Senate races and state assembly races. So in Wisconsin, in this cycle, with the way this ballot is structured, with a heavy top of the ticket presidential race and nothing else, that means that those legislative races down ballot could be dramatically affected in a way that they may not in a typical structured election with other races above them.
Matt, do you agree?
I was thinking for a while that Trump was going to be an albatross around the neck of Republicans down ballot and maybe some cement on their shoes too. But I don't think that's happening or may not happen. We'll have to see. I mean, the Senate race that is most vulnerable for Democrats, the state Senate race, is Patty Shackner's up in the northwestern area of the state. She had a surprise victory last time around when Sheila Harsdorf had retired. And a lot of the Democratic outside groups seem to have pulled their money from her, which if I were her, I'd be really angry about. The outside independent spenders are outspending, on the Republican side, are outspending the Democratic groups, something like 6-1. So that's a lot of money to have to beat back.
Let's remember, Matt, it's one district where what's the outspent factor across Wisconsin, Democrats over Republicans, about 7-1 when you add it all up?
Well, in state races, it's easily 2-1. The state Democratic Party of Wisconsin, I mean, tipping my hat to Ben Wickler. He knows how to shake the money trees. He's
Cash
really
those checks, baby.
He's outdistanced the Republicans. I mean, we've got a ton of outside money, though, which I don't like no matter where it's coming from. It's huge amounts. And that's because the Republicans and Scott Walker redrew the campaign finance law in 2015 to let rich folks give unlimited amounts of money to whichever political party they wanted. There used to be a de facto $10,000 limit on that, and that went straight out the window.
Well, now the Democrats are enjoying that because they're taking checks of hundreds of millions of dollars from famous people in California and governors of Illinois and anybody else around the country that has a pen and a checkbook. And there doesn't seem to be any shyness out of taking those checks and taking that money, because the fact is, Democrats for years never really did much. And this cycle, the pocketbook's open. They certainly want to buy themselves into the redistricting field, as well as getting rid of the president and taking control of the U.S. Senate. So the fact is, you know, this election, the Democrats, as you said, tip your hat to the Democrats for the fundraising job that they've done, and for those people that have written. But I don't think that you can ever again characterize money in politics as one party harboring that more so than the other, because you lost that argument tonight. Public financing the campaigns went down the toilet tonight. And, you know, Democrats took the checks, cashed them, and they used them in the right way, except in a few places.
They're playing by the existing rules. But let me be clear. I don't think our politics should be a tug of war with a handful of billionaires on the left against a handful of billionaires on the right. I think we all should have an equal tug on the rope in a democracy, and we're a far cry from that right now. And
right.
Republicans are cashing big checks too, from like Marlene Ricketts from Omaha. She's a co-owner of the Chicago Cubs. She's sent $1 million over to the Republican Party over the last couple of years.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. You still have 45 minutes to cast your vote in Wisconsin. We will see you both in about an hour or so. Matt, Brandon, thank you. We'll see you soon.
Great.
Guys, back to you.
All right, Mark, thank you. And as Mark just said, we are about 45 minutes away from the polls closing. So if you haven't gotten out yet, right now is the time to go.
And remember, if you're waiting in line, right at 8 o'clock when the polls close, you will still be able to cast your ballot. We spoke with Wisconsin U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin a short time ago about the early voting turnout.
It's been a tremendous amount of energy. And I know that we worked really hard to assist voters to vote early, to vote by absentee, but knowing that some don't feel satisfied unless they've turned in their own ballot, they've run it through the scanning machine themselves. So we know that there's still a lot of people showing up today on Election Day. And I feel great about especially the level of participation early. I think that those are going to be favoring Joe Biden. But we might have to wait a little bit after the closing of the polls to get the final count.
In every race today, turnout could be key. Madeline O'Neill is at the Madison City Clerk's office with the latest on how things are going there today. Maddie?
Well, the goal here in Madison was to count the more than 120,000 absentee ballots that have come in by the time that polls close at 8 o'clock. Last time we checked, as of 4 p.m., nearly 90% have been processed. Now I'm joined here with City of Madison Clerk Mary Beth Witzel-Bale. What are the latest numbers with that?
We have polling places calling in right now and reporting their progress. And as far as I know from when I stepped out here, there are 2 locations that are still processing absentees. Everybody else seems to be done with processing the absentees.
Wow, and that's 2 locations out of how many?
92.
So you're getting really, really close, if not there yet. So I also want to ask, Glad we have a little bit of time because a lot goes into this process of counting the absentee ballots, making sure that every single vote counts. Can you kind of walk me through what that process looks like, starting with, the absentee ballots being here and then being taken elsewhere to be counted?
When the absentees are delivered to our office, whether it's through the mail or in person or Dropbox, we have multiple staff checking those envelopes to make sure they're complete. So the envelopes that came into our office without a voter signature, a witness signature, or a witness address were returned to the voter to get those items completed. And then they could return that absentee to our office to be counted. We updated the state registration system so voters could check online to see that we had received their absentee. And then we had poll workers sorting those envelopes by ward and alphabetizing them to speed up the process at the polls today. So that saved hours at each polling location today. And when they were sorting everything, were also doing one more check to make sure those envelopes were complete and could be processed. But the envelopes stayed sealed. And it wasn't until today at the polls that those envelopes could be opened. But first they needed to be checked into the poll book. And it's just like you check into the poll book at the polling place when you're there in person. A poll worker would take 5 absentee envelopes at a time, walk them up to the poll book, announce those voters' names and addresses, and those voters are assigned a voter number in the poll book. And then the poll workers could open those envelopes, remove the ballots, and completely separate them from the envelopes. So we're not keeping track of who cast which ballot. Those are secret ballots. They then flatten the ballots as much as they can to help them fall nicely into the ballot box and feed them into the tabulator to be counted. So that has been going on all day at the polling locations, starting at 7 o'clock this morning.
Wow, and so we spoke a little bit earlier, but you talked about how there's a lot of new poll workers this year. The community really came out to support that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, we had to stop taking poll worker applications when we were at a point where 6,000 people had applied to work at the polls. And then we did have some cancellations related to COVID, just because of what our community and the whole state is facing. But we still had over 5,000 people scheduled to work at the polls today. And of that 5,000, 4,000 were brand new election officials. And this is their first experience with working at the polls. So we had to hold 50 beginner training sessions via Zoom to give these new officials an overview of the process of what they'd be doing at the polls today. And by this point in the day, they all are experienced poll workers.
How much do you think that played into we're, not even at 7:30 yet and you're so far through the absentee ballot processing?
It really did help because it takes humans to process the absentees. And we had enough space at our polling locations. The businesses and the school district and other government entities such as the UW were very generous with their space, so we could have polling locations that would allow for social distancing and for more election officials to work than we've ever had work in the past. For previous presidential elections, we've had 3,000 poll workers, and today we have over 5,000.
So, even with all of that, did you think you'd be at this point where you almost have the absentee ballots processed?
We knew it was possible and are very pleased to see that it is taking place at the polls today. So the 2 remaining locations that were processing absentees just a few minutes ago appear to be on track to finish, if not by 8 p.m., within minutes of 8 p.m.
So the last thing I would want to touch on then, it sounds like the results will likely be complete, pretty much on time like usual.
For the city of Madison, and as you're waiting for the results, what's taking place at your polling location is that the officials are checking, double checking, and triple checking that all ballots have been counted and that the number of voters equals the number of ballots cast. And that's what takes place across the state. The priority is to get a complete and accurate count. So it's not a race. The fact that we're finishing at a decent hour tonight is no diss on any other municipality that might run later than us. The most important thing is that the election officials are able to guarantee that everything was counted and counted correctly.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. You know, as she mentioned, not all municipalities will have everything counted by the time's polls. By the time, you know, people stop voting. Dane County still says that there will likely be communities still processing those absentee ballots, but they hope to get most results up by 11 p.m. tonight.
All right, Maddie O'Neill live tonight. Maddie, thank you so much. And News 3 Now will continue to bring you live local coverage throughout election night until at least midnight. We'll be streaming local content nonstop right here on Channel 3000 and on our streaming app, Channel 3000 Plus. In a few minutes, we'll be doing a cut-in on CBS into network programming, which you'll see play out live here as well. Afterwards, we'll be back to continue our local coverage. Stay with us. All right, thanks for joining us for this News 3 Now election night update.
The polls close about 35 minutes from now, capping off the 2020 election season here in Wisconsin. Let's check in with our Madeline O'Neill now, who is at the Madison City Clerk's office to get an update on how things have been going so far today. Good evening, Maddie.
Hi there. Well, knock on wood, so far so good. Of course, we've been tracking closely how long it's taking to process these absentee ballots. As of 4 p.m. here in Madison, nearly 90% of absentee ballots had been counted. I just caught up with the city clerk here. She says that of all the polling locations, only 2 are still processing absentee ballots, so she thinks the goal of getting them all processed by 8 p.m. will be met. If not, it will be met shortly after, and then those results will be up likely around the same time as usual. Then in all of Dane County, there are still communities processing absentee ballots. Likely won't be complete by 8 p.m. according to the county clerk, but he imagines that most communities will be able to get their results up and online by 11 p.m. tonight. Now, of course, not quite 8 o'clock tonight. You still have time to go out. If you have an absentee ballot, you can take it to your polling location, otherwise vote in person. And if you are in line by 8 o'clock, you will be able to vote.
All right, Maddie O'Neill, live downtown. Thank you. And outside of the presidential race, we're also keeping an eye on several local and statewide races.
In the 1st Congressional District down in Rock County, incumbent Republican Brian Stile is taking on Democratic challenger Roger Pollock. In the 2nd District, which covers the Madison area, Democrat Mark Pocan goes up against Republican challenger Peter Theron. And in the far western parts of our viewing area, Democratic incumbent Ron Kind is taking on Republican Derek Van Orden.
And a big factor in these races, and all the races tonight, of course, will be turnout. Our Jamie Perez has been at the polls all day today. She joins us live with the very latest. I think she's at Elver Park, right, Jamie?
I am at Elver Park, and with just 30 minutes here at this polling location, there is maybe 1 or 2 voters here, just a couple of last minutes here showing up to the polls. It's been a little slow, actually, for the last hour. I think we saw a little bit of a rush between 4 and 5 as people were getting off work, but even with that rush, people were still able to get in and out pretty smoothly, and that's pretty much been the case all day. Lines have been moving fairly steadily. Now, the one thing that's different and unique about this location that I mentioned in my hits a little bit earlier is this outdoor tent. Now, this is the first time ever that they've provided something like this, and this is actually the only location in Madison that has this. And the city clerk told me that it was because of COVID-19. So they wanted to provide a space where they could be socially distanced. There's plenty of PPE gear here, and plenty of people have been obviously following and abiding by the social distancing guidelines. Now, the chief inspector here said that the absentee ballots have all been counted. They actually finished counting them about 3 hours ago, which was much earlier than they anticipated, but they've had about 65 poll workers working really efficiently all day that they were able to get all of those things done. A lot of them are excited that they get to go home early tonight, and that's something that a lot of them were not expecting to be able to do.
All right, Jamie Perez live at Elver Park on Madison's West Side. Jamie, thank you. And for our continuing local coverage of tonight's races, we are currently streaming nonstop at channel3000.com and on our streaming app, which is Channel 3000 Plus. Head to channel3000.com/apps to find your connection to our coverage. Again, that's channel3000.com/apps. Stay with us for continuing coverage. And thanks once again for watching News 3 Now and Channel 3000's Election Day coverage.
Just about a half hour before polls close in Wisconsin, and people are still casting their votes. Jamie Perez is live with the Chief Election Inspector at Elver Park's polling place, Sean Lamb. Jamie?
All right, so we just have 30 minutes until the polls close, and right now things are actually very quiet. You can actually see behind me, they're actually starting to pack up some of the polling stations here because there is nobody here. A lot of the voters came early or they cast their absentee ballots. So now that he has a moment to talk, we're going to talk to the Chief Election Inspector here tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. So when the polls close in 30 minutes, what's the process going to be from there?
Well, first thing is we got to make sure that all the ballots that were delivered are cast and counted through the tabulator. Then we've got a process on the tabulator that we go through to make sure that the election results get up to the county. and it will print some results tapes that we then need to forward to both the city and the county. So there's a little bit of a process that needs to go through there. Plus we have some write-ins that we need to check for on the actual ballot. So we're going to check through those, we're going to tally the write-ins, and then we're just going to finish off the paperwork and bring it all back to the county clerk, or city clerk, I'm sorry.
So you guys are actually going to be able to go home a lot sooner than you expected. What time were you expecting to go home tonight, and then what time do you think you'll actually be able to go home?
Well, I worked at the 2016 election, and we stayed very late that night. And tonight we're gonna get home probably around 10:30 or so. So we're gonna be a lot more reasonable time tonight.
And you have been an election inspector for the past several years. How has this year been a little bit different? And you can even talk about this tent that we're in. This is the first time that something like this has happened too.
Well, the biggest change that I've seen is just the number of absentee ballots that came in this year. We've had probably about 75% of our turnout just at this polling place was absentee ballots.
Wow. So in terms of the lines of people showing up in person, what did the lines look like throughout the day? Did you guys have busy times and slower times?
Here, the busiest time was the very first hour from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. as people come out and they want to vote before going into work to make sure that they get their vote in and get it counted. After that, it really kind of slowed down for us, so we only had a trickle of people coming in throughout the day, which really gave us a lot more time to process the absentees, so we were able to finish that early.
And now that you guys have actually finished processing those absentees, can we go over I see you have your sheet here of some current numbers. What are the latest numbers here at Elver Park?
At this location, we have 4 wards that vote here in this polling place. One ward had 0 voters come in, which is normal because it's a very small ward in a new construction area. One ward we had 512 people, another we had 1,222, and the third one where we had voters, there were 11 ballots cast, and that includes both in-person and absentee for all 3 of those wards.
Okay. And how did those numbers compare to like the 2016 election? I know that you don't have the specific numbers from then, but in general.
It feels like it's a lot more because there was a lot more absentee ballots to process this time.
Okay. And your experience here, I heard you talk a little bit about some interesting things that you saw, some things that were new that you had never seen before. What were some of the challenges or unique situations that you faced?
Well, here we only had a couple of little small ones, and one was just an absentee ballot that we didn't expect to receive because it was one that actually arrived late from the August election. But the same voter casted a ballot for this election, so that ballot gets counted. But we can't count the August election ballot because that election has ended in August. That was the weirdest that I saw today. Everything else was just minor things where someone wrote down the wrong number and we found and fixed it and got the paperwork back where it should be.
Okay, but basically everything has been fairly smooth sailing. Is that something that you anticipated for this election?
Mostly. There's always something that happens every election, and it's always something different, but we've got a great team, and we're all more interested in accuracy than we are in speed. And even so, with so many absentee ballots, we got working on those early, and we were able to concentrate on them, and we just got through it.
And you guys also had a table set up where you had people registering the same day to vote. What did that process look like, and how many last-minute registrants did you have?
We had somewhere around 80 some same-day registrations today. I don't have the exact number on that, but last time I counted it was 75, and there was like 5 or 10 more after that. Same-day registrations for us are normal, and Wisconsin is one of those states where you can register the same day that you vote.
Mm-hmm. And earlier you were mentioning to me that because of the increase in the absentee ballots, the city hired additional poll workers to be able to deal with all of that. Do you feel like that was sufficient and that's the reason why you guys were able to get things done so quickly, or did you feel like you had too many people here?
I think having the extra people is what really helped us get through everything so quickly. We had extra people here than we do normally, and if we didn't have those people, then we would still be counting absentee ballots. There was just so many of them that we had to go through, and everyone was in the right frame of mind, processing them and getting through them in a timely manner and accurately.
All right. Well, thank goodness for the smooth sailing. I think that's something that we all were hoping for, and
Yes.
you know, good for you guys for getting it done quickly and efficiently.
And I'm glad we can get home at a reasonable time tonight.
Yes, very much so. All right, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll let you get back to finishing. Again, you have a few final moments to get to the ballots and to the polls, I'm sorry, and cast your ballot if you would like to do so. If you are standing in line, your ballot will still be cast. It doesn't seem like there's any lines in a lot of these places, but make sure you get your ballot counted this year.
Jamie, thank you. Several seats are also up for grabs in the state legislature tonight.
Amanda Quintana joins us with what we're watching as far as state races tonight. Amanda, one of the main questions is really what's even at stake in the state legislature. Of course, Republicans have a pretty commanding control there.
Yes, yeah, so really the short answer to that question, Eric, is redistricting. So it happens every 10 years, and it's going to happen again based on this year's census, the 2020 census. So really, there's about a dozen races that people are really watching tonight to see if Democrats can flip those seats. Now, that's something that we've only seen once in the last 10 years. So it would be really big if they flipped a bunch of those seats. But what we're watching for tonight is to see how many Democrats can flip.
Some Democrats are hoping that they can indeed get to 14. I've heard some people saying that they thought 15 seats were a possibility. That might be too optimistic, but in any case, if they can get closer to the majority, that's obviously going to be much better than where they are now, where even though in statewide elections, there are more people who vote for Democrats than Republicans. The Republicans have got over, almost 2/3 of the seats in the assembly. So we are the most gerrymandered state in the country.
That gerrymandering that he is talking about, that happened about 10 years ago with that last redistricting, and that has really shaped what the legislature looks like right now. Eric, as you mentioned, a lot of Republicans in the legislature, and it doesn't really accurately show a representation of Wisconsin voters. And so that's why they think the gerrymandering really had something to do with that. So whoever is elected tonight will have a role in that next redistricting. So let's take a look at some of those races that we're paying close attention to tonight. One of them, Senator Alberta Darling. She's a Republican who spent almost 30 years in the Senate, and she's being challenged by a Democrat, Neil Plotkin. This is her first challenger in 12 years, and that is near the Milwaukee area. Then near La Crosse, where Senator is moving to a new job, so Democrat Brad Pfaff and Republican Dan Kapanke are fighting for that spot. Pfaff was the Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection Secretary, but in that position, he was put in that position by Governor Evers, but Republicans voted him out. Kapanke has held that seat before, but was recalled in 2011 after supporting Act 10. And then in our area, Representative Todd Novak, a Republican who was elected in 2015, is being challenged by Democrat Chris Marion, who has raised almost twice as much. Novak won re-election in 2018, but by just 1 percentage point. So that could really be a close race to watch tonight. Of course, we'll bring you all the information about how many seats the Democrats are able to flip, if any.
All right, beautiful night down there along the Capitol Square, the Capitol behind her. Amanda Quintana. Amanda, thank you. And any political expert will tell you elections often come down, of course, to voter turnout.
Political scientists say they consider President Trump's 2016 Wisconsin was nearly a tie. Political reporter Amy Reed is here in the studio with an update on turnout and where which party wants to see high participation.
So polls are still open for a little bit longer, but in the state, but clerks are counting those thousands of absentee ballots voters sent in over the course of the last few weeks. And we're starting to see high turnout, especially here in Madison. Now, we'll look a little closer at where turnout is going to play into the state of the race in a few minutes. First, I want to look at the issues driving people to vote and how that looks across the state. Now, there's some crossover where Democrats and Republicans agree on what's important, but it's more divided this year than even in 2016. The economy is the only issue that cracks the top 5 for both Trump and Biden supporters, according to Pew Research. What we're seeing for other big issues on either side is when a high percentage of one supporter say an issue is very important, the other side just doesn't match. For Biden supporters, the top issues in order are healthcare, coronavirus, racial equality, economy, and climate change. And for Trump supporters, it's the economy, violent crime, Supreme Court appointments, immigration, and gun policy. Now, we're also going to take a little bit of video here. Take a look at this spread when Pew mapped this out. Two of the biggest issues for Biden supporters are climate change and racial equality. And that's where we see the biggest gaps in importance between these two sides. Now, I want to compare that to when Pew did their same survey in 2016. You can see, look at the length of those lines when you see each of those issues written out. The difference between Trump and Clinton, how people viewed that's much smaller than it is this year, where you can see those points farther along the line. There's quite a few where you're within 10 percentage points on the right on 2016 issues, and on the left you can see much more spread out, and that percentage is the amount of supporters who rated these issues as very important. There are some similarities between top issues in 2016 and in 2020. The economy is king, coming in #1 both years. Healthcare, foreign policy, immigration are others that stay in the top 10 issues in 2016 and in 2020. Now, on the economy, Trump might have an advantage. When Pew asked, more people believed Republicans could handle that issue better. The latest Marquette Law poll also showed a slight majority of people approving Trump's handling of the economy. And this is big for all voters, but in Wisconsin, there are places where it plays a larger role, and Naomi Coles is going to help us out now, looking at one spot crucial for Republicans if Trump is going to take Wisconsin.
Yeah, Amy, there's two major counties that I'm watching tonight, and they include Kenosha and Racine. Republicans have told me you can't win the state without drawing a line from down here in southeast Wisconsin all the way straight up north without hitting a blue county. And when you think about that, Kenosha is one that really is being watched by both parties because you have the economy coming into play there. Also in Racine County, where there's been that Foxconn deal that hasn't produced the number of jobs that was promised to be produced. But when you look at these two counties, they went blue. I'm going to go back to, this is right now our 2016 election result map. If we go back to 2012 presidential, and bear with me while that loads here, but you'll actually see they went blue. They both of these by slim margins. So Kenosha 55%, and Racine 51%. They voted for Obama. In 2016, they went back to Trump, as you'll see there. So these are two that we really want to keep an eye on, because without these are kind of the ones that if they're blue, you can't draw that straight line up around Milwaukee up north. That's key to the Republican map. Now, a couple other things when it comes to, you mentioned earlier about turnout. The big turnout base for Democrats in the state is obviously right here. Again, this is the 2016 map. Keep that in mind. This is not a map from tonight. This is Dane County, Milwaukee County. This is the big blue machine. That's how a lot of strategists describe this to me. You have to turn out the vote in these two counties, and you have to build up really big Democrat margins in order to win the state for Democrats. Now, kind of similar if you look over here at what we call the WOW counties. So that's Waukesha, that's Washington, that's Ozaukee. Watch Waukesha especially tonight, because again, if the turnout, that's where the turnout needs to benefit Republicans. In fact, one question I asked a lot of Republican strategists going into this was, what does your winning map look like if you don't get high turnout in these counties that benefits Trump? And honestly, they start hedging their bets. They're like, well, we got to really see good numbers out of Brown County. We've really got to rack up margins across this part of the state here. You see how red that was in 2016? It's got to look a lot redder. But back to those WOW counties, you got about 300,000 votes in the last few elections based on that. If they don't rack up the margins there, that's really important because, again, Dane County, that's more than 300,000 votes. Milwaukee County, that's about 450,000 votes. These are rough numbers, by the way. And, Amy, we were just actually talking a little bit ago in our Facebook Live, kind of talking about how some of those major drivers, some of the issues driving some of that turnout in Dane and Milwaukee County. So what would you highlight as important there?
Well, so in Dane County, we've got a large number of young voters because of UW-Madison. And a big issue for younger voters is going to be climate change. It's more so than in other demographics, and that's one of the top issues for Democrats in general. And then looking over in Milwaukee, something that I'm really interested in seeing is what kind of turnout we see on the north side. That was an area that notoriously largely stayed home in 2016. And in talking to experts, there are a few reasons for that. There were new voter ID laws that went in. There were also fairly unpopular candidates in 2016. But there have been groups that have formed since trying to boost turnout on the north side. And it's a prominently African American area. And that's an area where Biden is polling extremely well. So that might also just add to his margins in Milwaukee.
And one thing that Republicans, and my IFB fell out, so I can't tell how much more time we have at the moment, but one thing Republicans told me about in Milwaukee County is they're hoping to see a bigger turnout that benefits Trump among the Black and Hispanic communities. They believe they put a lot of effort into this over the last few years, and they think that they're going to see their vote share increase in Milwaukee County. That's not something that Democrat strategists agree with when they talk to me about that. They don't think they see that internally either, but that's a big question mark that both parties believe going into the night. Do we see bigger turnout in Milwaukee County, and do we see bigger margins for Trump out of that area?
Right, and we also want to look at margins in the WOW counties where when you and I are doing research for our stories, when we're talking to these political experts, they're talking about the change that we're seeing in suburbs across the country, and it's a little slow coming to Wisconsin, but we are going to check the margins in the WOW counties and see if Democrats are able to even if Republicans are expected to win, how much can Democrats kind of not only just cut into the votes for Republicans, but just gain votes for themselves.
Yeah, and that's where, to flip back again to 2016, that's what we keep looking at. In 2016, I'm looking at this right now, down here in Waukesha County, let me zoom in on there for you. Trump got 50%. Clinton pulled 45%. In other counties here, was that on Racine? Yep, that was on Waukesha. So if we look at Washington County, he's pulling 67%. In Ozaukee, he's pulling 56%. Now, these are the counties where if we see, and again, Waukesha results aren't going to be in until much later. The election officials over there have said they might not be in until midnight or later. But if we don't see Trump hitting 60% there, that's a really bad sign for Republicans in the state. And that's where, again, they have to make that up somewhere else, whether it's Brown County and Outagamie County, whether it's by racking up those margins in rural and western Wisconsin. You have to find those votes somewhere else. And that's where Republican strategists have told me they think it's a bit of an uphill battle in order to get there. And while we're talking about that, if we've got a couple more minutes, we can talk about rural Wisconsin, because this is where, let me pull that map back out for you. And again, keep in mind, this is the 2016 map. We'll just hit home there. This is what was believed to really have elected Trump in some ways in 2016, was he pulled, you see some of these red counties, he pulled really big margins here. He won these counties by, in some cases, 20 points. A lot of these counties would have much closer margins in past elections. They might have voted red, but by much smaller percentage points, and he really racked up that number of votes. And one thing that was interesting that a Republican strategist told me, he's like, we feel that it might, the turnout there might have been capped out to some degree. We aren't sure how many more votes we can pull out of rural county. I mean, out of these rural counties, because these are small population counties. There's not as many there. And speaking of issues, some of these issues that you've looked into, I know you've done special reports on this when it comes to those rural issues driving those concerns in rural Wisconsin.
Yeah, and we are going to get to that further on in the night. Naomi and I could talk your ears off, but Charlotte, Eric, we're going to toss it back to you.
Thank you both very much. Now next to Rock County, where President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence both made several trips to Rock County over the past few weeks.
Adam Duxter has also made a few of those trips. He's in Janesville right now to tell us what's happening down there in Rock County. Adam?
Well, ahead of tonight, I doubt this was the result that anyone expected. I mean, we were breaking records for early voting in Rock County and Janesville, where early voters cast more than 20,000 ballots. That's more than half of the entire registered voting population in Janesville. And it's not even 8 o'clock, and we're cleaning up. They are counting these things much faster than they had ever imagined. And that's why the gym here at St. Patrick's is starting to pack up for the night, because as we look at our last check, they've got just only a couple thousand more ballots to scan through, and they've proven they can scan through a few hundred in the course of just a few minutes. So we are way ahead of schedule that we anticipated being here in Janesville and as Rock County as a whole. I just checked in with Beloit, and they are very close to wrapping up their absentee ballot counting as well. And again, that was going to be an issue, or a lot of people thought that was going to be an issue headed into tonight, is how long is it going to take to count all those absentee ballots? At this point, it's looking like they could be done just about the same time as the polls are closing here in Wisconsin.
All right, that's Adam Duxer live in Rock County tonight. Adam, thank you so much.
News 3 Now will continue to bring you live local coverage throughout this election night until at least midnight. We will be streaming local content nonstop here on channel3000.com and our streaming app Channel 3000 Plus. In a few minutes, we will be doing a cut-in on CBS programming, which you will see play out live here as well. And afterwards, we'll be back to continue our local coverage. Thank you and stay with us.
Thanks for joining us for this News 3 Now Election Night Update.
The polls close in about 5 minutes in the state, marking the end of the 2020 election season. We have reporters at polling places all across the viewing area.
And we'll start right here in Madison, not far from us on the west side. Jamie Perez, who has spent the past few hours at Elver Park. Jamie, what's the latest there?
All right, well, just a few minutes left here for any last-minute voters who want to cast their ballot. We did just see one person. That's like pretty much the only person that we've really seen here for the last 30 minutes. It's been relatively slow throughout the day. They actually kind of took down the polling booths here a little while ago. They just have 2 left for any, again, last-minute voters. Anybody left that you see here are election workers doing their final counts, their final paperwork that they need to be able to get that to the clerk's office tonight. And they're very excited to be able to get home much earlier than they expected. They actually finished counting the absentee ballots several hours ago, and that's because they had 65 poll workers here throughout the day, which made the process incredibly efficient. And you can also see that we're in a tent. Now, this is the first time that the the city of Madison has done something like this, and it's because they wanted to be able to provide a space where they were able to socially distance. So it worked out very well for them. Now, a last note is for voters at 8 o'clock, this place will become basically an open meeting so that people can publicly access the process that happens after the polls close. So for anybody interested, that is an option for you here at Elver Park.
Jamie Perez reporting in Madison tonight. Jamie, thank you.
Next to Rock County, where President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence both made several trips to Rock County over the past few weeks.
And Adam Duxter is live now in Janesville. Adam, what's the very latest down in Rock County?
Well, if you've been following our coverage of Rock County today, one word comes up more than any other, and that's smooth. We had no issues at the polls, and even though we've got more than 20,000 absentee ballots to count, well, that process is wrapping up a lot sooner than officials first thought it would be. In fact, they are starting to clean up the gym here at St. Patrick's because they are almost done counting those absentee ballots. They've had a crew of about 50 to 75 people in this gym counting all day long, and out of those 20,000 plus, well, they're getting closer to about 19,000 ballots counted at this point. So again, not what anyone had anticipated. We spoke with people earlier who said they're prepared to stay here past 11 or midnight or even 1 a.m. But now again, as you mentioned, we're just a few minutes from the polls closing, and all of those absentee ballots are just about accounted for. So expect to see those Rock County results come in earlier than later tonight.
Adam Duxter live in Rock County. Adam, thank you.
So with the polls closing shortly, we should have results on a number of referendums in our area. The Madison School District is asking voters to approve 2 questions. The first asks to spend $317 million on building projects, including improvements to all high schools and a new elementary school. If the referendum passes, construction to renovate Madison's 4 main high schools and add an elementary school would wrap up in 2024. The other asks approval to exceed levy limits by $33 million over 4 years. The operating referendum would allow the district to surpass the state-imposed revenue limits at an increasing amount each of the next 4 years.
Another one in Janesville. The school district asking to spend $22.5 million on building projects. School district wants that for capital needs, and Janesville also needs to exceed those levy limits. And as those results come in, we'll continue to scroll those results at the bottom of your screen. Stay tuned. The numbers will come in shortly.
You're good. You're good.
Thank you for watching News 3 Now and Channel 3000's Election Day coverage. Polls throughout Wisconsin are now closed.
If someone is still in line at this point, however, they will still get a chance to vote, but we may not know those final results from Wisconsin tonight or potentially for several days. That's because there are so many absentee ballots being counted this year.
As of this morning, the Wisconsin Elections Commission reports more than 1.9 Wisconsinites returned absentee ballots either by mail or by dropping it off. Nearly 650,000 people throughout the state also voted in person before Election Day. Right now, the WEC hasn't released any data on how many people voted today.
City of Madison expecting to have all of its absentee ballots counted in the next few minutes. The city's clerk says results will be posted on Dane County's website in the next hour or two. As of this morning, 121,000 absentee ballots just in Madison had been returned for counting. The clerk says they processed 92% of those by 4 o'clock this afternoon. Latest numbers show 137,000 people in Madison have voted so far in the election, and that's 73.5% of the registered voters in the entire city.
Things are going swiftly counting absentees in Madison. In Milwaukee, it's taking much longer. The Milwaukee Election Commission's executive director is planning to provide an update any moment. We will bring you the latest through the night.
And as of last night over there, it's about 165,000. I think it's about 175,000 absentee ballots now in Milwaukee County. 30,000 of those have been counted as of noon. Again, it's going to take a while there. At an afternoon briefing, they said they didn't know how many people actually voted today, but they said it'll probably take them into early tomorrow morning to get the county's results, maybe 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. So be patient there.
We do have team coverage across southern Wisconsin tonight as we wait for ballots to be counted.
Well, let's go back to Susan Simon, who joins us now with some experts to discuss the integrity of the election, when we'll be able to get some results in Wisconsin. Susan.
Polls are closed, and now things start to get interesting. This is where the night gets very exciting. Hang on there we go. Now can you hear me?
We got you.
Okay, now you got it. This is where things are really going to start getting interesting now. If you're just joining us, let me reintroduce our panelists tonight to talk about the election. Ken Mayer is a professor of American
lost
politics.
her phone before COVID-19 happened. So
that's Francis. Francis, can you hear me?
They're used to their regular phone, and so that's been tough. I have a niece that's there that with all her kids. So
it looks like they're having a conversation. They're catching up and having a conversation. Can you guys hear me? We're live on the air right now. Can you hear me?
Oh my.
Can our panelists hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Oh. Yeah.
803.
I'll tell you what. Should I give it back to you, Eric and Charlotte, and let us get this figured out?
Why don't we try to figure out exactly that?
Yeah. All right, let's see if we can get our audio issues figured out and then come back to me. But we'll send it back to you for now.
All right, I want to give our crew in the booth a chance to get our mics switched over because, okay, now they've got us. All right, when it comes to the presidential election, you know, we've talked a lot about turnout. We've talked about different areas and how they dictate, maybe give us a little indication of where this election is headed. Well, few counties correctly choose the nation's leader quite like Sauk County does.
Now they're good?
The county has missed, they're good apparently, as you just heard from Susan. The county has missed just 3 times since 1964, in 1976, in 2000, and 2004. For more on how Sauk County has handled today's count, we are joined by Gabriella Becerra in Reedsburg with why a lot of people are focused on Sauk tonight. Gabby?
That's right, Eric and Charlotte. All eyes are on Sauk County tonight. That's because for the past several elections, they've voted for the next president of the United States. In 2012, they voted for President Obama, and then in 2016, they voted for President Trump. So all eyes, again, are on Sauk County tonight because history tells us that it's likely whichever way Sauk County leans could be a predictor of the election. Both parties, the Wisconsin Democratic Party and the Wisconsin Republican Party, are watching closely, anticipating which way it will lean. We talked to them earlier. Here's what they had to say about Sauk County.
Sauk County is a great place to look at. Sauk County, went for Trump in 2016. It was a classic Obama-Trump county. Then Sauk County went for Evers and for Baldwin. And when I look at the numbers coming out of Sauk County, they really track the numbers that we're seeing statewide. If Biden and Harris are winning in Sauk County, that's a very, very good sign for winning the entire state. If they're losing there, then that's a cause for concern. And it's one of a few kind of bellwether counties that we look at across the state that seem to track the statewide numbers.
And then really dropping down and looking at Sauk County. That's a county that's often talked about, and watching that as a predictor of how things look on the night.
I'm here with Carrie Walker. She is one of the owners here at Bistro in Barley. For our viewers who don't know much about Sauk County, tell us a little bit about what your county is like out here.
It's rural, and for 9 out of the last 10 presidential elections, whomever Sauk County chose as the winner, whoever we voted the most for, ended up being the president. So, of course, the national media is all eyes on Sauk County. Everybody wants to get their finger on the pulse and find out what it is that we know that makes us pick who the winner is.
Do you have an inkling as to what that is? What kind of voters are there? There's a lot of farmland out here, but you're not too far from the Madison area, so you guys are kind of a purple area.
Yeah, I like to say time and time again, we might have 10 people sitting here eating lunch, and 5 of them I know are Trump voters, and 5 of them I know are Biden voters. I feel like we are split so much. We are truly a purple town, it seems to me. That's just been our experience.
Tell me a little bit about what's going on here tonight. You guys are watching the election.
Yes, we're not typically open on Tuesdays. It's our one-day closed, but we felt like it was a historic evening, and then we're also friends of Mark Walden, who's running for the state assembly. So we decided that we would be open casually and that we would, just hopefully watch some returns and be part of history together.
What are some of the key issues that Sauk County is focusing on, especially here in Reedsburg, things that matter to the voters here?
I think like everyone, we are concerned about health care, and we're concerned about the COVID response. Obviously, Sauk County hasn't been really hit with a lot of COVID problems compared to other parts of the state, but it certainly doesn't mean it's not going to come here, and I think that's a concern to people. Our hospital is one of the largest employers in the city, and so we all know people who would be on the front lines. It's our neighbors and our customers and probably family members, because so many people work at our hospital.
What has kind of been the environment around Sauk County with the election? Has there been a lot of excitement, a lot of stress?
There's been a lot of excitement and a lot of consternation. I think people have been on edge. There have been reports from both sides of signs being defaced and stolen, which I don't understand. I will say one thing that we've noticed this election cycle, that when we've driven around, like on the Farm Art Detour for Fermentation Fest, we saw far more Biden signs than we saw for Hillary in 2016. And if I were to say, just from that impression alone, there's a lot more interest and excitement in this election than there was in 2016, which is, I think that might explain why Donald Trump won Sauk County in 2016. There just wasn't the excitement for Hillary Clinton's campaign. And I wonder if the number of signs that we've seen really in the last month, they've just been popping up everywhere. And so I wonder if that's really telling us something.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Again, we are at Bistro and Barley in Reedsburg and Sauk County. What she was just saying was echoed earlier today by the Reedsburg City Clerk. He was saying there was a record turnout of early voting, a record turnout of voter registration today. He says that the city, more and more people were showing up, he thinks, because that it was a contested election. So he was saying that now that the polls are closed, they should have results anytime soon. Earlier today, Sauk County Clerk says they were busy all day. Baraboo experienced long lines of voters that wrapped around the building. Here in Reedsburg, voters were streaming through all day, but the clerk tells us that more than half of registered voters voted early. Both cities broke records on absentee ballots requested and returned because polls were so busy today. Municipalities in Sauk County weren't able to start counting absentee ballots until later this evening. And because of that, we might not know the election results here in Sauk County until early Wednesday morning. Back to you, Eric and Charlotte.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's go back to Susan Simon, who joins us now with more from her expert panel talking about the integrity of this election and maybe when we'll be able to get the complete results in Wisconsin. Susan?
All right, hopefully we got our microphone issues sorted out here and you can see and hear my four panelists tonight. If you're just joining us, let me reintroduce them for you. Ken Mayer is a professor of American politics at UW-Madison in political science. I was earlier when they joined us, I teased that Ken is our returning champion. He has been with us every election night since 1992. It would not be election night at News 3 without Ken. Frances Huntley Cooper is the former mayor of Fitchburg, and she is a member of the organization Black Women for Biden. Brian Schimming is a political strategist and the founder of Wisconsin Strategies. Brian is also a radio talk show host, and if you're big on Facebook, I'm sure you've seen Brian often doing his Facebook Lives discussions. I've learned a lot about politics listening to Brian over the years. And Senator Kathy Bernier is a Republican state senator from Wisconsin's 23rd Senate District in the all-important western part of our state. She is not running for re-election tonight, but she served previously for 13 years as the Chippewa County Clerk, so she can give us some great insight into what is happening tonight. Okay, can you all hear me? You can all see and hear me.
We hear you, we cannot see you.
Oh, you can, that's okay. As long as you can hear me. As long as you can hear me, that's good. Okay, so the polls just closed. Senator Bernier, let me have you put your clerk hat back on for us and walk us through the process here now and tell us what happens whether you either voted by mail or you went to the polling place today and cast your vote. Now, what happens to your ballot from this point forward?
Well, honestly, they're probably holding off on ending the election and running the printout that ordinarily occurs at the end of the election. Most likely, they're frantically trying to execute absentee ballots right now. So that's probably stressing them out a little bit. And the county clerk is now in her office or his office waiting on election results. So they're working hard to try to get some results out. But I don't think we're going to see anything very quickly because they'll be trying to execute absentee ballots. And many of the large municipalities at the polling place, they might be able to end their election and run their results because many of the large municipalities have central count where all of their absentees go. So those polling places can end their election and have some totals from those polling places. So central count takes care of all of the absentee ballots.
Now that's
right now,
that's how
the
they do it in
poll workers
Milwaukee.
are being stressed.
Explain a little bit more about where the ballots are counted. The central count happens in a place like Milwaukee, for example. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Other ballots are counted in your precinct.
That's right. So all of election day activity and election voters go to the polling places in these large municipalities. So that'd be Madison, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Waukesha. And so those polling places just handle election day voters. And all of the absentee ballots are programmed so that they can all be counted no matter which polling place, precinct that ballot is from. Those machines are programmed to take all of the ballots for all of the precincts and can run totals on all of the precincts. So they've been working all day since 7 a.m. at those central count locations, executing those absentee ballots. So they'll have a jump on medium-sized or smaller-sized cities that don't have central count, so we just heard Reedsburg didn't have time to execute their absentee ballots. So they're going to be working frantically now after the polls close and the voters leave, then they're going to be executing the absentee ballots there at the polling place.
Wow, I mean, we've all known it's a daunting process, but just to hear you lay it out like that, it just seems like an enormous amount of work that lies ahead for everyone. Are people allowed to observe the process at this point?
Not only allowed, encouraged. Both Republicans and Democrats have observers out there generally. that can sit and watch the process. And so all of the election officials, whether you're the clerk or the poll worker, chief inspector, the central count location, they all recognize that one of their main responsibilities is not only executing the ballots, but making sure that everything they do can be observed and monitored by any interested party.
Yeah, people may not realize that clerks work as hard as they do to preserve transparency in the process and try to demystify it for everyone. Just to hear you explain, how things go from this point forward, I think really contributes to that understanding, because we don't get an opportunity to see what happens behind the scenes. Once you turn your ballot in, that's sort of the end of the chain for you. And now the waiting game begins. Ken, I know you always you're a numbers guy, and you're watching the whole state. Milwaukee we're probably going to have to wait a long time for, but are you seeing numbers coming in from other areas of the state?
I just checked, and it's just too soon. And you always have to be very careful about the initial returns, because you don't know which precinct they're from. And, I remember in an earlier election that, in places where either the Democratic candidate or the Republican candidate was essentially guaranteed to win, as the first returns trickled out, it showed that they were losing. And you just have to, let the returns come in, not make any snap judgments based on the initial returns. I mean, I'm looking at the map now that shows, there are just a handful of votes in Douglas County, which, now is showing up as red. That's not going to be.
And it's reliably blue.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, you just have to, the patience is a virtue here, that there in Wisconsin, it's likely to be close. And in a lot of states around the country, in North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Ohio, it's close. And so we're accustomed to and kind of programmed to want to know immediately who won. But I think, given the way that this election has taken place, with so many absentee ballots and lengthier time, that it's clearly going to be into the wee hours and probably tomorrow before we get a lot of clarity.
Yeah, it's an unprecedented election in so many ways. Brian, do you think mail-in ballots in general, it's sort of a broad stroke, challenge the integrity of the vote?
Well, I think there's the issue of mail-in. I mean, I would always tell people, look, if you need to vote by absentee ballot, you should do as I did. I voted early, and I went to my clerk's office to vote because I wanted to hand it to the clerk. So it's not, in my mind, it's not a rap on the Postal Service to say, do we want to stuff 1 million or 1.5 million, 2 million ballots into post office boxes around the state and hope that they show up when people hope that they show up, that there's the efficiency that's involved. I think that's a little problematic. This election actually may end up providing some lessons, hopefully not hard ones, but end up providing some lessons on mail-in ballots. People will say, well, the military folks, do it already, but really this will be the first year that we see the kind of scale of absentee ballots being mailed in than we would otherwise. We had, I think Ken mentioned, we had about 650,000 in-person ballots. I just, for my money, I've always told people, if you're going to vote absentee, if you are able and you have to vote absentee, to do so at the clerk's office. We've seen a number of anecdotal issues already on mail-in ballots, and I suspect we will be hearing a lot more about that as the days and weeks go ahead here. And that will certainly be the case if we have a bunch of, it's almost guaranteed to be the case, is if we have a bunch of close states and we end up in recounts. There's already dozens of court challenges filed by Republicans and Democrats alike, not so much here in Wisconsin, but in other states. So that will add to the mix. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, this is a marathon, not a sprint. That is for sure.
It is.
Francis, how has mail-in voting in general been embraced in the African American community? I know in past elections, sometimes black voters have felt disenfranchised. Does this give them more confidence that their vote is going to be counted, that they have more flexibility, for example, this great experiment to cast your vote rather than just on one day, to do it when it is convenient for you?
Okay, so I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes. Did you hear me?
Okay. Yes. I saw internet problems at one point. So first of all, I have actually worked the polls. I've been a poll worker, poll observer, and I've been in the polls where my absentee ballot was there, and someone looked over and said, "Francis, would you like to put your ballot in? Come on over." So, and this is in the city of Fitchburg. So I have seen that process work. Because of COVID-19, a lot of people in my age group, we're seniors, we're African Americans, we have pre-existing health conditions. So a lot of us are not going to the polls on election day. Some of us really want to, and that's been a tradition. But I think we saw an increasing number of African Americans who said, no, I'm going to put my ballot, I want an absentee ballot. Not necessarily returning it in the mail, though. We used the ballot boxes that were spread throughout the city of Madison or the city of Fitchburg, whatever municipality they lived in. I actually had someone wanted to make sure their ballot got to the city of Madison. So they asked me if I would drop it off for them because they were traveling. And I had the opportunity to do that. A lot of people, though, basically got absentee ballots. And then, of course, we had to make sure people signed them, got the witness, because then a lot of ballots were spoiled because they weren't filled out completely. So we didn't want that to happen. So we had a lot of encouragement to get those ballots, do absentee ballot, whether you were a senior citizen or whoever.
Francis, I apologize. We're running out of time. I could talk to the four of you all night, and we'll do this again in just a little while, but that'll do it for our time this time. The grand experiment continues. So stand by, and we'll rejoin you in just a little while. Thanks, guys. Back to Charlotte and Eric.
Larry, Susan, as we were talking, you guys were talking about, we were starting to get our first results here in Wisconsin when it comes to the presidential election. Just over 25,000 votes in so far, so not much. President Trump leading Joe Biden by about 8,000 votes. For our continuing local coverage of tonight's races, we're currently streaming nonstop at channel3000.com. Also, our streaming app, Channel 3000 Plus. Just head to channel3000.com/apps to find your connection to our coverage. Again, channel3000.com/apps. We're going to take a look at a few more of these leader pages, these result pages as the night goes on. No surprise in any of these District 1, 2, or 3 that you're going to see here, the incumbent eventually they're favored to win all of these. But stand by for our coverage on CBS, and we'll be back here for continuing coverage on channel3000.com.
Thank you for joining this News 3 Now election update. Polls throughout Wisconsin are closed.
Now, we're not going to know the final results from Wisconsin maybe at all tonight or potentially for several days, so be patient. But there were so many absentee ballots this year, it is going to take a while.
As of this morning, the Wisconsin Elections Commission reports more than 1.9 million Wisconsinites returned absentee ballots, either by mail or by dropping it off. Nearly 650,000 people throughout the state also voted in person before Election Day. Right now, the WEC hasn't released any data on how many people voted today.
City of Madison expecting to have all of its absentee ballots counted about now. The city's clerk says results will be posted on the Dane County website in the next hour or two. As of this morning, counting. 121,000 absentee ballots in Madison had been returned for counting. The clerk says they processed 92% of those by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The latest numbers show 137,000 people in Madison had voted so far in the election, 73.5% of all registered voters in the city. Now, when it comes to the presidential election, few counties correctly choose the nation's leader, quite like Sauk County.
The county has missed just 3 times since 1964 in 1976, 2000, and 2004. For more on how Sauk County has handled today's count, we are joined by Gabriela Becerra in Reedsburg with why a lot of people are focused on Sauk tonight. Gabby?
Hi, Charlotte and Eric. That's right. All eyes are on Sauk County tonight. That's because, like you said, for the past several elections, they've predicted who the next president of the United States would be. In 2012, they voted for President Obama, and then in 2016, they jumped red and voted for President Trump. Now, both sides, both the Wisconsin Democrats and both the Wisconsin Republicans, are waiting to see which way they're going to swing tonight.
Sauk County is a great place to look at. Sauk County, went for Trump in 2016. It was a classic Obama-Trump county. Then Sauk County went for Evers and for Baldwin. And when I look at the numbers coming out of Sauk County, they really track the numbers that we're seeing statewide. If Biden and Harris are winning in Sauk County, that's a very, very good sign for winning the entire state. If they're losing there, then that's a cause for concern. It's one of a few kind of bellwether counties that we look at across the state that seem to track the statewide numbers.
And then really dropping down and looking at Sauk County. That's a county that's often talked about, and watching that as a predictor of how things look on the night.
Polls are closed now, but the Sauk County clerk says polls across the county were crowded all day with long lines at some, including at Baraboo, where we saw the line wrapped around the building. Now, Reedsburg, they saw less of a crowd except for this morning. And we're going to go back to Charlotte and Eric.
Gabby, thank you very much for that report. We are starting to get results in the presidential election in Wisconsin. Again, polls close tonight at 8 o'clock, and we don't expect to know full results in most counties until at least early tomorrow morning.
For our continuing local coverage of tonight's races, we're currently streaming nonstop on channel3000.com and our streaming app as well, Channel 3000 Plus. Head to channel3000.com/apps to find your connection to our coverage. Again, channel3000.com/apps.
Thank you for joining us. Polls have been closed for 30 minutes now, and elections officials are advising people to be patient while waiting for results.
More than 100 million Americans voted early this year, a lot of that having to do with the coronavirus pandemic. First tonight, a look at the race for the White House in Wisconsin. Donald Trump and Joe Biden. The latest numbers, again, very early as we just started to get those numbers in. We're not seeing anything really yet from Madison. Just 13% of precincts reporting the president with a 52-46 lead over Joe Biden at this time.
And we're going to go to Mark Kane now, who is in the news center, who has experts joining us tonight to watch for, what to watch for in Wisconsin. Mark?
Charlotte and Eric, thank you. We are joined, as we always are every election night, by Matt Rothschild. He is the executive director of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. He's the former editor and publisher of the Progressive magazine. And on the Republican side is Brandon Schultz. He is He's the president of the Wisconsin Grocers Association, but he has a 15-year career in local, state, and national politics. Good to see you again, guys.
See you, Mark.
Keeping an eye on the early returns. What are we seeing, Brandon? We'll start with you.
Well, early is the operative word there because you're just seeing some dribbles and drabs. Probably most of the interest is what's going on the East Coast with the results for the presidential race. And again, it kind of shows it close, but as they were just saying, they're really waiting to see what happens when the polls, which are now closed here in Wisconsin, but as results start to come in, how that will start to impact the presidential race.
And most of the early results has been reported from the people that voted today, not necessarily the absentee ballots. Is that going to make a big difference, Matt?
Yeah, especially in Milwaukee. I mean, Milwaukee, the city is not going to report on its absentee ballots until the wee hours of the morning. And a lot of those absentee ballots, I think you can assume, are Democratic, and the vast majority of Milwaukee votes are Democratic, and they're not going to report on those. So we're not going to know here in Wisconsin definitively until tomorrow morning. So I think people should just stay calm and be patient, and we'll see the count come in. The only early numbers that I saw were out of Dane County with 11% reporting, showed 69% for Biden and 29% for Trump. That's almost identical to how Dane County ended up with Hillary. It was 70% last time for the Democrats. I think the Biden camp would want that number to go up maybe a little bit.
We have 10% of the votes in now, and Trump has a slight lead, Brandon, but it looks like a very predictable turnout so far.
So far, and again, everybody wants to know right now who's going to win. And as Matt just said, you're not going to know. So, there's a number of benchmarks that we're all going to want to see how things turn out. What the size of the turnout is in Milwaukee and Dane counties. Is that going to hit 90, 95%? What's going to happen in the northern half of the state where Trump won his election last time? Is he going to perform as well as he did? And then you're going to start to look at spot markets around the state. What happens in Green Bay and the Fox Valley and La Crosse, Janesville, Beloit, Kenosha, Racine? All those little areas across the state, we're going to be watching to see what those results are and what the trends are. And as we do that, we're also going to want to see what's going on down ballot. So as much as we would like to know right now, instantaneous, elections are not about, instant gratification. You have to be very patient. And as Matt was suggesting, maybe take a nap tonight before tomorrow, before you're going to find out the results. So this is a very slow process. Let our clerks and election workers do what they do, and that is sort through this in a very detailed process to make sure that it all works and works correctly.
And Matt, what areas are you looking at across the state?
So I'm looking at Dane County and Milwaukee County, of course, Waukesha County to see how Trump does this time versus how he did last. Remember, last time he didn't do as well as Mitt Romney did in Waukesha County. So that's kind of interesting. And then I'm going to look at the counties like Sauk County, Columbia County, Richland County, Lafayette County that all went for Obama in 2012, but then flipped over to Trump in 2016. And then there were some counties up north that had huge shifts from Obama just barely winning to Trump winning by massive amounts. And it'll be interesting to see how those shake out.
What about voter turnout? Does that favor a candidate, one or the other? Matt?
Well, if turnout is huge in Dane County and Milwaukee County, certainly that favors the Democrats. If it's huge in Waukesha County and the Wild counties, then Trump can get some solace out of that. I think it may be big all across the state. because the thing about Donald Trump is he gets his votes out and he gets the other guy's votes out.
Yeah, Brandon, what do you say? What do you say to that? High voter turnout.
Yeah, somebody has said Trump has been the Democrats' biggest fundraiser and turnout mechanism they've had in years. Doesn't say much for their candidates, though. You know, both of the campaigns, with their infrastructure on the ground through their state parties and others, have spent months identifying their voters and turning them out to vote. You include with that all the legislative candidates that have been so active with their volunteers to get them to turn out. Yes, you know, every single election is about turnout, regardless of the candidate. So every campaign, from the highest levels of presidential down to the state assembly and others, they all work on it. But the biggest challenge is getting people out to vote. Today was a beautiful day across Wisconsin, incredibly beautiful fall weather, great for voter turnout. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that with all the hype that we've had on this presidential race from both sides, with all of the concern of the elections with coronavirus, with all the talk of the majorities in the legislature, with all of the money that has rained down on Wisconsin in just torrents, nobody should be surprised that turnout in this election should be one of the higher ones that we've had over the years, over the election cycles.
And that would be great. I mean, in 2004, there was a 73% turnout. In 1960, there was a 73% turnout. I'd love to set a record today and tomorrow with the massive turnout and have it exceed. I wouldn't be surprised if it exceeded that. It's certainly going to come close. And no matter how you slice it, that's good for democracy when more people vote.
And this will affect the down ballot candidates as well.
Majority, I think it's going to be fine.
All right, I think we've lost your audio. I'm going to try and get it back here.
Idea that redistricting sets the races. I think you might see some assembly seats go down on the Republican side tonight that you would not have expected, nor could have projected. And on the Senate side, I think you might actually see a pickup by the Republicans, which kind of goes against this grain that these elections are set in stone no matter what. You know, you do have impact down ballot based on what happens on the top of the ticket. So nothing is a given in these races. And I think we will be looking to see if there are some surprises tonight. You know, the Democrat State Party dropped almost $800,000 in against Robin Voss. And Matt, I think I don't have my glass on, but I bet you're smiling about that because
it's kind of funny.
Yeah, well, you know, you enjoy it while you can, because you put $800,000 in an assembly race and you do it against a legislator. You know, you remember that old line is, if you're going to kill the king, make sure you kill him. Because I think, you know, when you just throw $800,000 at a race without any expectations of winning, you know, that is a telling story in this election. So many of these legislative races, you've seen millions of dollars spent where they've never been spent before.
Right. I mean, that was just kind of a beanball at him, just to tell him that, you know,
That's a very expensive beanball, Matt. 800 grand, you could
Brandon,
do a lot with $800,000.
It's not like he's been playing nice up to now, anyhow. So I think they wanted
retribution.
They wanted to put a little scare into the speaker. I think the race that one close race is the Assembly District 51 out in Dodgeville. Todd Novak, Chris Marion. You know, he only won that one by like 700 votes last time around. I think that's close. The Democratic seat that was closest last time was Robin Vining down in Tosa. She won by like 138 votes. So she's going to need to hold on to that for the Democrats to keep where they're at. But there are a few other Republican incumbents who might be vulnerable if the state goes strongly for Biden. But we got to wait and see.
Very early on. We'll keep an eye on things, and we will check back with you both around 10:30. Brandon, Matt, thanks for being with us. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks.
Eric, Charlotte, back to you.
All right, Mark, thanks for navigating a few of those issues there. Still some important communities across the state. They're going to take some patience while we're waiting on those results.
39 communities count their absentee ballots separately from their in-person turnout. News 3 Now's Naomi Coles joins us to explain why that matters.
Yeah, there are 14 of those counties that have those 39 communities. Right now, though, we are actually getting some results in on the map here. So just to set the scene a little bit, the polls have been closed now for about 45 minutes. So what you're seeing right now, none of this, I'm going to make this full screen here real quick, but this is our 2020 map in Wisconsin. Again, these are not many precincts reporting. So for example, if we look at Wood County here, it is 66%. I'm going to get into one little community I just honed in on in a second. But again, something to keep in mind, the colors we're seeing right now, these could change. These precincts are going to come in slowly over the next hour. Some of these rural counties, we're going to start seeing results a little bit faster than in the more highly populated counties down here because, again, there's not as many votes to count. I've been talking all night about the impact of rural Wisconsin, of course, on this race because rural Wisconsin was what part of what won the state for Trump 4 years ago. And now the question is, can he pick up the vote share, more than the vote share that he got there 4 years ago? So let's hone in on Wood County. This is a little bit just south of Marathon County. Marathon County is the center or the population center of the 7th Congressional District. Wood County, you've got a couple major cities there. Marshfield's kind of the big one. So a few minutes ago, I pulled up Marshfield precinct results. Now the whole thing is, can Trump pool the rural cities? Can he get more votes there than he did 4 years ago? So I'm looking at one precinct in particular. And again, this is not results. These are indicators. These are too small to actually impact the vote. But if we can see how he's doing in these rural cities, we might get some clues. So for example, in one Marshfield precinct, so Marshfield has a few different precincts, but 4 years ago, Donald Trump got just under 600 votes. Hillary Clinton got just over 400. Based on results that are feeding into me as I'm speaking, right now, though these are the total results for that precinct, Donald Trump has 490. So he's actually seeing a decline there. Biden picked up 200 more votes than Clinton. Why am I talking about this? These are only hundreds of votes. Again, I'm going to keep talking about this all night. Can he outperform what he did in 2016? Are we going to see that in those small cities that are starting to roll in their results? Is he doing better there? Is he doing worse? Because if he can't overperform or outperform in rural Wisconsin, then that's not a good indicator for the state. I'm going to bring in political reporter Amy Reed right now. She's again been reporting a lot on some of those issues that are impacting rural Wisconsin. Amy, what are we looking at tonight with the issues that are driving some of these voters to the polls?
So a big one is the economy, and that's kind of evergreen. You can kind of say that for every demographic. You can kind of say that every year. It was the #1 issue in 2016 too. But this is really big in rural areas because some of these other issues that we'll talk about don't always trickle out to people that live in rural areas. Sometimes they'll see these policies focus in on city centers. The economy is really where it gets delivered to rural areas. So they want to see good jobs, and that's something where Trump might have an edge. So manufacturing, for example, Trump campaigns on this, and he talks about bringing in more than 15,000 jobs to the state of Wisconsin. He shouldn't take full credit for that because it's not just a president that drives job growth, but that's something that's important to people, and it might still be something that drives them to the polls. Here are some other big issues and that we'll see for Biden supporters. It's healthcare, coronavirus, racial equality, economy, and climate change. So you see, economy is really big for Democrats too, but it's bigger for Trump supporters, and it's big in these rural areas. But you see violent crime, immigration, gun policy. Gun policy is going to affect too. But something that since the coronavirus. We've seen some of these jobs, like in manufacturing, not really recover. We're still at below rates in Wisconsin that we were before Trump took office. So if coronavirus is going to be driving people that are living in rural communities out, especially if they're seeing their hospitals facing big ICU shortages, that could drive them out to the polls, and that would drive them toward Biden.
So let's go back and look at this map again. Now, what I've got going on right now, you're looking at 4 different versions of Wisconsin maps. I'm going to walk you through these again. You might have heard me talk about this before. Over here, we've got the 2012 presidential election map. This is when Obama won. Again, you see a lot of, notice some of the shifts in color. Maybe if we could zoom in a little bit on this monitor, I can move my laptop out of the way. But you see a lot of blue around western Wisconsin. You see, obviously, these lower population counties up here, they frequently go blue. But closer margins around the 2012 election, right? So let's move over here, and we're looking at the 2016 election. As you can see, and again, this is why I keep harping on this, all that steep red across the rural part of the state. That's part of what carried that. You can see, and also this swingy region in here, this western Wisconsin, it's going red. Are we going to see, is that going to go blue tonight? Are we going to see changes there? Those river counties along the Mississippi, you got to watch those as results come in. Let's come back over here to the 2018 election. That was another close election. Now, it's not a presidential election, but it is a major election. It pulled about 500,000 fewer votes than the presidential election did in 2016. But again, you can see here, it's still heavy red. It's still heavy red across rural Wisconsin, but that's when western Wisconsin starts swinging back a little closer to blue. Again, that really, really swingy part of the state. So that's 2018. Now, this is tonight, and again, I can't emphasize this enough. These results don't base a lot of these on these colors right now. For example, these up here, I think last I checked, that was based on about 11% reporting. These are not accurate yet. These are just slowly coming in as those precincts report. But again, I'm going to zoom in. Most of these, there's not that many coming in. But Wood County, I mean, again, we got 68% reporting. So we're starting to see some results in, again, one of those more minor, smaller population rural counties. We can compare it. Right now, it's 68%. It's going to Trump, 61%. If we pull over here, 2018 governor election, the Walker vote there was 57%. Back over here 4 years ago, 57%. So again, these aren't final results. We're going to keep watching that. But those indicators are things that we have to keep in mind. Now, you might wonder, why am I not talking as much about, high population? We're here in Dane County. Well, in Dane County, we've got 34% reporting. So it's hard to really draw any conclusions based on that yet, because we've really got to wait to see more of those results in. But that does bring me to something that Amy and I have been talking about a lot all night, is what are some of those things that might be driving turnout in our big population bases? Again, we're talking about Milwaukee. We're talking about Dane County. You've been hearing this from Amy and myself. So Amy, let's go back to Dane County. We've got 34% in. Obviously, it's going to Biden, but what are the issues that we care about there?
Yeah, we've mentioned this a few times tonight, but we have a good population of young voters in Dane County from UW-Madison. They're very interested in seeing a politician do something about climate change, and that's something that Biden supporters, is one of their top 5 issues for them, and that's something that Biden has talked about throughout his campaign. Another top issue, it's number 2 for Biden supporters this year, is the coronavirus. We're seeing Wisconsin is not doing great right now, and so that is driving out a lot of people for Biden, at least in Dane County, where we do have these strong blue presence.
And let's go to Milwaukee County real quick. I'm going to zoom in on this. Now, we've been talking a lot about how Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, is a central count community, right? So right now, this is reporting, 82 precincts reporting. Keep in mind, we have all night to go with Milwaukee. We have a long ways to go. What they do is they count the in-person vote separately, or the in-person on election day vote separately from that absentee vote. So Milwaukee County, we're not going to get a good picture of that until later. However, we do know it's probably going to go, it's been traditionally a blue stronghold for Democrats. But something interesting that I'm going to be watching for in Milwaukee County is turnout. In 2016, the turnout was 61%, obviously favoring Clinton. However, 61% was less than Obama got there both of his elections, 2008, 2012. And Biden has got to be hoping for better turnout in Milwaukee County. I know that Representative Gwen Moore said that she was projecting earlier. She tweeted that they needed to pull hoping to pull 80% turnout. So that's just one of those issues that turnout is a big deal in Milwaukee County. Can we see an increase there?
That's right. And a big issue there, we're looking specifically as we zoom in on Milwaukee County, looking at the city of Milwaukee, looking at the north side. That's where we saw a lot of voters staying home in 2016. And that's where Democrats are hoping that they can pick up some more support. But Republicans also trying to pick up support in Milwaukee.
All right, Amy and Naomi, thank you very much. We do want to keep an eye on the results as they continue to come in tonight. Incumbent Republican Congressman Brian Stile against Democrat Roger Pollack. This is in Paul Ryan's old district, Congressional District Number 1. Brian Stile expected to win this rather handily, and he is way up with 54% of precincts reporting, earning almost 70% of the vote. Also in the 3rd District Congress race, this is Ron Kine's district, western part of our viewing area, La Crosse area, with 8%, so very early here. Ron Kine, the incumbent, trailing at this point, but again, we're at less than 10% of the vote at this time.
And then we have Republican incumbent Tom Tiffany against Democrat challenger Tricia Zunker. Tiffany wants to focus on reopening the economy and tackle COVID-19. Zunker wants to take on the virus with masks and social distancing, and you can see that Tiffany has 66% of the vote as of now. Officials with the Wisconsin Elections Commission say it's been a smooth election day across the state with no widespread issues. Administrator Megan Wolf says as voters wait to hear the results, keep in mind that accuracy is more important than speed.
Anything that's reported tonight, any declarations that are made tonight, those are based on unofficial, incomplete results. Because we also have things like provisional ballots. Those aren't, counted until Friday.
Election officials are urging patience. They say ballot counting could stretch into tomorrow and possibly beyond that.
A federal judge has ordered the U.S. Postal Service to have postal inspectors sweep facilities that were underperforming when it comes to election mail. That order applied to 7 battleground states that don't allow ballots to be counted if they were to arrive after Election Day, including Wisconsin. The sweeps were ordered to start this afternoon at 2 o'clock Central Time. According to new court filings, USPS performance on moving ballots had steadily declined since Wednesday. Postal Service officials say those delays were largely due to staffing shortages amid the pandemic. Voters in Wisconsin made their pick for president while holding negative views about the country's direction. That's according to the VoteCast survey by the Associated Press. The pandemic top of mind for voters. 46% of Wisconsinites called it the most important issue facing the nation.
For our continuing local coverage of tonight's races, we are currently streaming nonstop on channel3000.com and our streaming app, Channel 3000 Plus. Head to channel3000.com/apps to find your connection to our coverage. Again, that is channel3000.com/apps.
Once again, thanks for joining us tonight. We have team coverage all night as results start coming in. The polls closed at 8 o'clock, a little over, not quite an hour ago, I guess now.
We're just about there. Madeline O'Neill is live outside the City County building with an update on the City of Madison turnout tonight. Maddie?
Oh, well, sorry, we're already seeing the unofficial results come in on Dane County's website, and it might have sounded ambitious, but the city of Madison was able to get through processing most of the about 121,000 absentee ballots by 8 p.m. tonight. You know, even as of 6 p.m., they had gotten through 92% of those ballots. The city clerk credits being prepared and having plenty of new poll workers to help process them steadily throughout the day as in-person voting was taking place. Total voter turnout was at 82% at 6 p.m. We won't know the final turnout in the city until after the chief poll inspectors physically bring in the results. Now, we also talked with the Dane County clerk, who says that some communities had an easier time processing those absentee ballots than others, but overall things went smoothly. He says most results in communities should be up tonight by about 11 p.m.
Maddie, thank you. Adam Duxter is live for us in Rock County tonight.
He has the latest updates on absentee ballot counting and voter turnout there. Adam?
Well, there's 96,000 registered voters here in Rock County. More than 20,000 of those voted absentee here in Janesville. And where we stand right now, well, we've got just a couple of tables left, counting those absentee ballots before those will all get sent up to the county building and be added to the totals, which, speaking of, totals are starting to come in Rock County. 17% of the vote is in so far, and what we're seeing is a slight lead for President Trump, but we're also actually seeing every Republican candidate with a lead so far. And again, it's very early, and we're still waiting to count every single one of these absentee ballots here in Janesville, and we've been told the 8,000 or so absentee ballots in Beloit will be registered about 9:30 tonight. So keep an eye out for those times.
Adam, thank you.
All right, also in Rock County, the Janesville School District referendum, that getting the yes nod so far with 3/4 of the precincts reporting, 64-36 in the yes column. And let's continue on with referendums, the levy there. This goes along with that other one, also getting the yes vote right now. Again, 76% of precincts reporting. Moving on quickly now to the Madison School District referendum. A lot of folks keeping an eye on this. An overwhelming number saying yes at this point in time, with 74% of precincts reporting in Madison. The yeses have it on exceeding levy limits at $33 million. And this is the big one on building projects, 80-20 in favor. These kind of have to go together. 3/4 of precincts reporting. It looks like the referendum at this point is cruising for an easy win tonight.
The operating referendum, for continuing coverage, local coverage of tonight's races, we are currently streaming nonstop on channel3000.com and our streaming app, Channel 3000 Plus. You can head to channel3000.com/apps to find your connection to our coverage. Once again, that is channel3000.com/apps.
Good evening and welcome to our continuing election 2020 coverage.
Polls have been closed for just over an hour now, and we are awaiting results. Of course, all eyes are on the presidential election. 10 electoral votes are up for grabs here in Wisconsin as the candidates work to reach that magic number of 270.
There you see the president with a slight lead. We're just getting started, though. We have team coverage tonight across the state. Our reporters are keeping an eye on multiple counties as we wait to find out who the next president will be.
And breaking down where each party needs to win and how it compares to 4 years ago. We begin with Brady Mallory, who is keeping an eye on all the hot races we are following tonight.
Yeah, you've heard a lot of people say that the presidential race might be the one that people are paying attention to, but a lot of local races deserve voters' attention as well. So let's start off with, we have a referendum question asking for $317 million to renovate some schools and build a new elementary school in the Madison Metropolitan School District. Right now, 80% of voters are saying yes, with 74% of the precincts reporting. And we have another one that goes along with that, exceed levy limits by $33 million over 4 years. And this would be an operating referendum that would allow the district to surpass the state-imposed revenue limits. And right now we're at 77% saying yes, 23% no, and 74% of the precincts reporting. Now let's turn our attention to Janesville. Some more school stuff here. The school district wants $22.5 million for capital needs. So that includes like replacing or updating operating systems. 64% of voters are saying yes, 36% no, 76% of the precincts are reporting. And we'll stick with Janesville. This is also asking voters to exceed levy limits by $37 million over 4 years. This would counter declining enrollment and state aid. 54% voters say yes, 46% saying no, 76% reporting. We're watching some other races, and we'll get to those later. I have to say they are very, very close. I stopped biting my nails about a year ago. I'm holding on so far tonight, but we'll see where the night takes us. Charlotte and Eric.
All right, Brady, thank you. This election has been unlike any other, of course, with a record turnout, the absentee mail-in and in-person early voting due to the pandemic.
Here in Madison, they're getting close to counting the record number of absentee votes. Madeline O'Neill has been in Madison all day, keeping an eye on those polls. And how did things go, and what's happening right now, Maddie?
Well, it seems to have gone smoothly. Polls have closed, but that doesn't mean the work is over. We're seeing workers here at the city clerk office accepting election material from chief poll inspectors. But really what seemed like one of the most ambitious goals of the day was processing the more than 120,000 absentee ballots cast here in Madison. And it sounds like they were able to do that around the time that polls closed. So I'm joined by City Clerk Maribeth Witzel-Bale. She's here to talk about that. I mean, are you surprised that you guys were able to handle that task?
No, it's not a surprise because we had so many people who had signed up to work at the polls. And at 7 p.m., there were only 2 polling places still processing absentees, and they were on track to finish by 8. I didn't check in with them at 8 to find out if they had completely finished, but it was looking like they would.
And one thing you talked about earlier was that they were able to process these as in-person voting was happening. So it seemed to be kind of a steady process that, helped things roll along.
Exactly. And we told our officials that as voters come in, don't stop processing the absentees. We want to be transparent about what's happening. So we want voters at the polls to be able to see this going on as well.
And, you talked about that transparency. Even after 8 o'clock when the polls closed, there's a lot of double checking, triple checking that all of these ballots were cast. Can you just kind of talk about how you make sure that, every absentee ballot was counted?
The poll workers have a checklist that they go through before they can run the results. And they are making sure that the number of ballots counted equals the number of voters that they've checked in. They also are all just stopping, taking a moment and looking around them to see that all absentees have been processed and that there's nothing left to be processed before they print the results, announce those results, and then modem them into the county clerk.
And then real quickly, I just want to ask you about voter turnout. Where are we at and when will we find out those final numbers?
At 6 p.m., we were at 82.4% voter turnout, which would be a record for us for a presidential election. But we know that final total was going to be higher. So as the inspectors bring in the materials tonight, we'll be calculating the final turnout. We should know that in a couple of hours.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time. I also touched base with the Dane County clerk earlier today. He said while some communities are having an easier time processing those absentee ballots than others, everything went fairly smoothly, and you should expect to see results trickling in on the Dane County website right now.
Maddie, thank you. How Wisconsin goes will depend on certain areas of the state.
Naomi Coles joins us now to break down what we are seeing right now. Naomi?
All right, Eric, right now we are looking behind me. This is the current map, the 2020 map of where we're at. But again, I'm going to keep reminding you all night long, these are very preliminary results. These shades of red are going to change. The shades of blue are going to change. But let's see where a few key counties are shaping up right now. Let's first turn to Marathon County. We have 79% precincts reporting. Right now, Trump is at 67%, Biden at 31%. Now, important to keep in mind, we have to check later on in the show. I'll be checking to see if those include Wausau results. Wausau is a big city there, and they typically vote. They're a bit more blue. So let's move on to Outagamie County. I believe that one is next. Winnebago County. So right now we've got 69% of precincts reporting. Right now Biden is polling at 43% and Trump is getting 55%. A big key there. Winnebago is one of those key Fox Valley counties that Democratic strategists tell me they just want him to do better than 41%. That's what Clinton got in 2016. They just want to see him pull more votes there. Right now we're seeing that. We'll see how it goes as the night goes on. Moving now to Outagamie County. Again, a little bit farther north from Winnebago. Again, part of that Fox Valley. Appleton is there. 43% precincts reporting. Biden is at 41%. Remember what I said about that 41 number? And then Trump is at 57%. And then if we're going to come back right now, I'm going to show really quickly how these results have shaped up in the past few elections. So right now, again, we've got current going back to 2012, 2016, 2018. Right now, we just looked at Marathon County. So if we're going to look at that as kind of an indicator of where the roll vote is going, Trump is going at 64% right now. That's a little bit higher than what he's gotten in past years, but those results are not final. And that, again, is why I'm talking about that, is that's an indicator of where that roll vote is going. And Amy Reed now joins us. She's been looking into some of the issues that these rural voters care about and is going to be breaking down a bit of that right now.
That's right. For rural areas and really everywhere is the economy. Now, this is big across demographics. It's one of the only issues that does rate high when you look at different age breakdowns. And this is important to rural voters because it's one issue that you can see once you leave a city. Political experts will tell you rural voters can feel ignored by politicians. Now, with jobs, that translates. Some of the big industries like manufacturing, we did see job growth under Trump. More than 15,000 manufacturing jobs came to the state. Of course, Trump shouldn't take full credit for that, but he campaigns on the issue. Since the coronavirus, manufacturing jobs have not recovered. We're still seeing fewer jobs than before Trump took office. And there's still a strong perception, according to polling from Pew Research, that Republicans are better suited to take on the economy. And the latest Marquette Law poll also showed a slight majority of people approving of Trump's handling of the economy. In rural areas, he's still speaking to these voters and showing an interest in what they care about. He'll talk about trade and what he accomplished in renegotiating NAFTA. Now we have the USMCA. Trade economists question the true impact of that deal when you look at the tariffs that came from the trade war with China and given other deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership that we still have to kind of balance out how all of these trade deals come together. And we also have to look at the coronavirus and how that has impacted industries important in rural areas. Like we talked about manufacturing, those jobs haven't quite recovered. So if coronavirus is a driving issue for people in these communities, that's an area where Trump just does not do as well. Biden is seen as someone that has a plan in that area, and it's something that we see in polling that people largely disagree with his handling of the pandemic.
Amy, thank you. Another area we are closely watching tonight is Sauk County, which could serve as a predictor for what we might see come in the rest of the state tonight. Joe Biden looks to carry that area tonight.
It looks like with 100% of, at least this is just Reedsburg, 56-42 Biden there. But again, that's just a small part of Sauk County. Gabriella Becerra joins us now live from Reedsburg with more on what's happening in Sauk County. Gabby?
After the polls closed, the clerk checked the ballot box one last time, finished tallying up those votes. And like you said, Biden won this area, and he calls this a record-breaking day. The clerk, Jacob Cressetto, says about 60% of people voted early, nearly doubling since past elections. They finished counting those absentee ballots just before 7 tonight. He says a big line of voters were waiting early this morning But since then, it's been a slow stream of people all day. In Baraboo, it was the opposite towards the later evening hours. A long line of voters were wrapped around the building starting around 4:30 p.m. It took those voters about 45 minutes to get to the front of the line, they told me. Crissetto says they weren't sure what to expect going into the election, but they were pleased with how today went.
Well above where we thought we were going to be as well. We had roughly 2,200 in 2016, and we're almost 1,000 more than that. So yeah, there was a line of about 400 people this morning at 6:15. And for Reedsburg, I mean, that's a lot for us.
Reedsburg also broke a record on voter registration today, but registering about 500 people. Now, just because Reedsburg has those results in, the clerk of Sauk County says many municipalities got a late start on counting absentee ballots this afternoon, so they're not expecting results for the whole entire county until possibly early Wednesday morning.
All right, yep, we've talked about that. It's going to be a bit. Sit tight, be patient. Gabriella Becerra, live in Reedsburg. Gabby, thank you.
Stay with us. Our team is hard at work tracking tonight's election results.
Plus, Dana is tracking your forecast. Stay with us. It's after a short break. It's not all about elected office tonight. Another important decision facing voters is from the Madison Metropolitan School District.
The district is asking for $350 million with two questions. The district wants to spend $317 million on building projects, including improvements to all high schools and a new elementary school. The district is also asking to exceed the levy limit by $33 million over the next 4 years to pay for yearly costs for programming and staff. Both have passed. We're keeping an eye on what's at stake for MMSD and what it means for the district going forward and your tax dollars now that it has passed.
And Jamie Perez joins us live from the school administration building. Jamie?
Right, well, according to those results so far, an overwhelming majority of voters have voted yes. Now, what exactly was on that ballot? Well, the two referendums are asking for a total of $350 million to go towards new building renovations and ongoing maintenance and operations of their programs. And this is the largest ask in state history from a school referendum. MMSD spokesperson Tim Lamont said they really need both of these to pass because they go hand in hand. So I asked him what the next steps are should both of these referendums pass when the final votes are tallied.
Very thankful for all the voters of the city of Madison who supported our referendum. And then we would begin scheduling meetings with architects and general contractors to begin the groundwork. The tentative timeline is to engage in a year-long planning and design initiative with family, staff, and community input. And this would be in early 2021. And that would be followed by a competitive bidding process in the winter and spring of 2022, with construction anticipated to begin in the summer of 2022, with completion sometime in around August of 2024.
Now, with the passing of these referendums also comes an increase in property taxes. The first referendum would mean that in each of the 4 years, the property taxes would rise $80 over the previous year for the owner of an average-sized home. On that second referendum, it would add an additional $140 per year for an average homeowner. Now, the results are still coming in. As you heard, we will be keeping track of those results on channel3000.com and live here, so be sure to keep tuning in.
All right, Jamie Perez in Madison tonight. Jamie, thank you.
And now we are going to switch gears and turn to meteorologist Dana Fulton with our forecast. Hi, Dana.
Hey, a very different story for us out on the patio right now. We had a nice sunny day today. Anyone who did have to wait outside in line during the polls or while they were trying to go vote, thankfully didn't have to deal with any inclement weather this afternoon. That sunshine with us throughout the day. Here's a time lapse actually from our Queen Bee Radio Skycam in Platteville. Barely even a cloud coming through and some nice color with our sunset. Temperature-wise, in a great spot. We saw high temperatures well above average, and that's how we're going to stay for the rest of your work week. A very mild trend expected. Sunshine expected through the weekend, mild until the start of next week, and our next rain chances start to develop by the end of the weekend and continue again into the start of the week. Overnight, we're mostly clear, but it's not going to be as cold outside to start off the day. For Wednesday, temperatures will be in the mid-40s early on. Our breeze continues from the southwest, so that's going to help fuel our afternoon high temperatures yet again climbing into the 60s. A few clouds develop Wednesday night into Thursday, so we're partly cloudy for early Thursday morning, but that'll clear out by the afternoon. So for Thursday afternoon, we're back to mostly sunny skies. We get to continue seeing that sunshine again. It feels a little more like June outside with our highs in the 60s as opposed to early November, but those high temperatures on Thursday, again, in the 60s. So that rain chance, we do have to fast forward just a little bit. Early Monday morning, so Sunday night into Monday, we have a slight chance for some showers to pass through. More rain expected throughout the day on Monday and into Tuesday. Notice those showers kind of moving through slowly and saturating much of the state. So watch our accumulation totals climb a little bit for early in the week. That tapers off during the morning on Wednesday. Areas north of us might be seeing a little light snow, but for us, the ground's going to be too warm to pick up a little bit of light rain. Overall temperature trends still above average in our 6 to 10 day outlook for us in areas east. And then if you look off to the west, quite likely they will be seeing temperatures below average. And the same continues in that 8 to 14 day trend. Warmer air along the eastern half of the country with a below average trend likely off to the west. Our rain chances trending a bit above average in that 8 to 14 day outlook. Like you saw with that rain developing for early next week, it kind of puts us in a little bit of an uptick for what we usually see for this time of year. It's not usually that soggy for early to mid-November. Tomorrow, 64 the high, mostly sunny and certainly mild, more than 10 degrees above average today for tomorrow. And as we look ahead through the 10-day, the trend will continue on. Keep these sunglasses on hand, but feel free to put the umbrella away for the work week. We're in the 60s for the next several days and into the weekend. Though our wind speeds start to pick up again by the weekend, breezy on Saturday, a little windy outside on Sunday, with shower chances developing Sunday night into Monday. A slight chance for early Monday, the better opportunity throughout the rain Monday and Tuesday. A little bit of a mix possible Tuesday night into Wednesday, but as you saw, likely not going to see much for us. At that point, the ground will still be warm. We don't see cooler temperatures really developing until the middle of next week. So overall, a mild and sunny trend with our forecast.
It'll be nice to have the rest of this week to be in the 60s.
Absolutely, yes. I think nobody's complaining about what we have there.
Very high approval ratings.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dana.
A look at some more races as we go to break, and we'll be right back. You're watching our continuing election 2020 coverage.
Polls have been closed for about 90 minutes now, and we are awaiting results. Here's a look at where the results for Wisconsin are tonight in the presidential race. 10 electoral votes are up for grabs here as the candidates work to reach that magic number of 270. Could be late into the night or the morning before the state can even be called.
Brady Mallory has a closer look at some of the other results we are tracking tonight. Brady?
Yeah, voters are not only shaping the nation, they are shaping politics right here in Wisconsin. Well, let's take a look at our first one. Democrat Tom Petzlwitz and Republican Scott Fitzgerald. Now, Fitzgerald is a longtime politician and the state Senate Majority Leader. Right now, Fitzgerald has a lead with 66% to his opponent's 34%. 75% of the precincts are reporting. Our next race, incumbent Republican Brian Stile versus Democrat Roger Pollack. And this is a district formerly represented by former House Speaker Paul Ryan. And if we look at the numbers, Stile has 68%, Pollack has 32%. So that's quite a big lead, but only 42% of precincts are reporting right now. Up next, Democratic incumbent Mark Pocan against Republican Peter Theron. And Pocan has a solid 73% versus Theron's 27%. Just a little more than half of precincts are reporting down there. Pocan is seeking his 5th term. And we will keep watching these, but back to you, Charlotte and Eric.
Brady, thank you. Ballot counting close to finishing up now in Rock County.
We've been monitoring voter turnout and the process there, and things seem to go pretty smoothly. Adam Duxter joins us live with what's happening. Adam?
Well, so far we've got just about 26,000 of the 96,000 registered voters with their votes counted in Rock County, but that's not counting the 20+ absentee ballots that are still being counted here in Janesville. Just one table left at St. Patrick's Elementary School in Janesville being counted, and we'll give you a look at how exactly they are counting all of these ballots once they are sorted, done by that machine there. It's counted more than 15,000, actually last check more than 17,000 ballots so far tonight. And when it's all said and done, those numbers will go to the county. Right now, we do see Republicans leading in every race here in Rock County, but that's something political scientists told us we could expect to see before those absentee ballots are being counted. The hope right now is that by 11:30 or before midnight, we'll have every city being counted in Rock County.
Adam, thank you. Another important area of the state tonight is Milwaukee County. They could be the last county in the state to report results.
As of 8 o'clock, 103,000 absentee votes had been processed. The county expects a total of 169,000 total votes cast absentee this year.
I think it's amazing how many people during a pandemic continue to believe in this country, believe in this community, and want to be involved in our democratic process.
The Milwaukee election officials estimate they may not be done counting until 3 or 4 in the morning. About 4,000 poll workers help make it a smooth election day there in Milwaukee County.
Stay with us. Our team is hard at work tracking tonight's election results. More updates after the break.
Welcome back, everyone. As Wisconsin counts the votes, the state also recorded a record number of COVID-19 cases today. Wisconsin recorded more than 6,000 new cases in one day for the first time. The state now has more than 239,000 all-time cases. 58 more people died today. More than 2,100 people have died in total. Well, this Saturday's Badgers football game against Purdue Boilermakers is canceled due to a growing number of COVID-19 cases. The Badgers have 27 active cases, 15 among student athletes and 12 impacting the staff. That's an additional 5 people just since Saturday. All practices and team activities are on pause. Last weekend's game against Nebraska was also canceled. Wisconsin's athletic director says they aren't for sure how the outbreak within the team started, but thought there was a possibility it could have been controlled by this weekend.
I wasn't ever confident. I was hopeful. I felt we were doing the right things in getting our players isolated, putting them individually in rooms. We had a good plan, and I was hopeful that we could corral this and be where we wanted to be. But I was never overconfident.
As for what's next for the Badgers, Alvarez says former Badger Troy Vincent sent him information on how the NFL has been able to stop the spread, and he's going to use that information to improve the Badgers' plan. Wisconsin needs to play at least 6 games in order to compete for the Big Ten title. COVID-19 continues to surge around the U.S. Positive cases are on the rise in more than 40 states. Pennsylvania recorded its biggest one-day increase on record, and Massachusetts is under a stay-at-home advisory in the hopes of curbing rising case numbers.
We're telling people to go home. We're not telling them to go to their friend's house or their neighbor's house or somebody else. We're telling them to go home.
Today, one of President Trump's top coronavirus advisors delivered a stark warning. In an internal memo, Dr. Deborah Birx wrote, "We are entering the most deadly phase of the pandemic." In Europe, Austria, Greece, and Sweden, and it joined the list of countries ordering new pandemic restrictions. The UK goes into lockdown on Thursday. There is a new tool to help track any potential adverse effects of a COVID-19 vaccine once one becomes available in the U.S. It's called vSafe, a new smartphone-based active surveillance program for COVID-19. Well, it's a way for the CDC to monitor vaccine recipients for any health problems through text messages and online surveys in the first week after a person receives the vaccine, and then weekly thereafter for 6 weeks. If any adverse events are reported, the program will help submit a report to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Federal health officials have been working hard to put minds at ease when it comes to vaccine safety.
FDA will not authorize or approve any COVID-19 vaccine before it has met the agency's rigorous expectations for safety and effectiveness.
During the early phase of distributing a COVID-19 vaccine, initial doses may be given to specific groups, such as healthcare personnel and other essential workers, so they likely would be the first to use vSafe. The CDC's website also lists 2 other ways to evaluate COVID-19 vaccine safety in real time: the CDC's National Healthcare Safety Network, and then larger insurer and payer claims-based databases through the FDA. The Dane County Medical Examiner's Office has released the name of the person killed in a triple shooting on Saturday. It happened along Flower Lane on the city's west side. The victim is identified as 30-year-old Jason Eggleston of Madison. He died on the scene. 2 other people were injured, and they are still recovering. Today, a federal judge ordered the U.S. Postal Service to have inspectors sweep underperforming facilities for election mail. The order is to ensure that no ballots have been held up. 7 battleground states conducting sweeps do not allow ballots to be counted after Election Day: Michigan, Georgia, Florida, New Hampshire, Arizona, Maine, and here in Wisconsin. People around the globe are watching our election closely, as the winner will shape future relations with other countries. People overseas feel they have a horse in this race, since presidents can change the course of history. President Trump enjoys a sky-high approval rating in Israel, with supporters hoping he gets 4 more years. Despite the president's unflattering description of African nations, hundreds are marching in Nigeria to support him. And in Russia, many fear a Joe Biden presidency. This resident of Moscow is calling Biden too aggressive. In the UK, most believe Biden should be America's next president. And coming up after the break, we'll get another check of election results and break down where Joe Biden and Donald Trump need to win in order to take the White House.
Well, the Madison School District addressing its referendum tonight, which won overwhelmingly. Let's listen in. On the left, new superintendent Dr. Carlton Jenkins. On the right, school board president Gloria Reyes. Let's listen in.
It was amazing. And I also want to thank our staff. I mean, Chad and Kelly, Mike Herding, and all those, everybody in our staff who worked so hard to just give us the information and get us to the point of advocacy and being out in our community and helping us organize. And my fellow colleagues on the board who just stuck with it, worked really hard, was an amazing achievement for us all. And this was definitely a team, and it was a team of community who just came together to support our students in the future of our school. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you, Dr. Jenkins.
All right, that's the school board president, Gloria Reyes, we just heard from there. Let's look at these numbers here. Overwhelming support. Again, just 80% of precincts reporting, but this is going to be a done deal here. 80% in overwhelming support for the referendum. The building project there, moving on to exceeding levy limits. Again, overwhelming. They go hand in hand. So if one was to pass, the other one would as well. So those are the numbers.
Here is a look at where the results for Wisconsin are tonight in the presidential race, with 55% of the precincts reporting. It is still very tight, but Donald Trump is in the lead as of now. And let's take a look at our county level results right now.
Naomi Coles joins us now to break it all down. Naomi?
All right, so right now, this is the map county by county that we're looking at for tonight. Again, as I'm going to keep reminding you, none of these shades of red could change, the shades of blue could change. Not all precincts are reporting. So I'm going to start by talking about Waukesha County. So that's one of the main counties where Republicans have to take a vote. And if we could take that full screen up real quick of where Waukesha is right now. 91% precincts reporting. Trump right now is taking 62%. Biden is taking 37%. Now, the reason we're looking at this county, this is one of the crucial Republican bases in the state. He took 60% here total in 2016. If he has to meet that or outperform, right now it's looking good. But a quick reminder, there are a few smaller municipalities in Waukesha County who are counting their absentee ballots separately. So we don't know what this is going to look like. This is just where this is at right now. And if we could come back to the map here, we're going to look briefly at Kenosha County. Now, Kenosha, right now with 73% precincts reporting, it's showing 65% for Biden. However, a really big asterisk on that is the city of Kenosha. The city, as I just mentioned, that's another central count county or a central count community, and they are not yet including the absentee ballots cast in the city of Kenosha. So while right now Trump is showing a fairly strong lead, that could easily evaporate after those absentee ballots are in. Now, the reason we're interested in Kenosha tonight, that's a really big county that both parties are looking at. Amy, what are we so interested in this for?
So Kenosha had a lot of national attention in the last few months following the police shooting of Jacob Blake. Both President Trump and former VP Biden visited there as we saw massive protests and unrest. And Trump visited again last night. A late visit paid off for him in 2016, and it's looking good for him this year, too. Trump has pushed a law and order message that could resonate here. Violent crime was the second biggest issue for likely Trump voters, 74% saying this is very important for their vote, according to Pew Research. Police shooting Jacob Blake also plays into a long narrative about how black people and other racial minorities are treated in this country. And for Biden voters, that's the third biggest issue in deciding their vote, according to Pew. 76% of them said that this was very important, and that's compared to 24% of Trump voters who said the same. But recent events aside, the number one issue, according to Pew, the economy, which is a top issue for Democrats and Republicans. It's also an issue Trump has stayed strong on throughout his time in office here in Wisconsin.
Amy, thank you. And Naomi as well. We'll be right back with live local election coverage. Stay with us. the runaway winners today was the weather out there. Dana Fulton, what a beautiful election day.
Yes, thankfully everyone voted yes for the forecast. Things look nice and sunny for the next several days with really mild temperatures in store. We had a lot of sunshine today, barely even a cloud in the sky as we take a look at our time lapse from our Queen Bee Radio Skycam in Platteville. A really gorgeous day if you had to spend any time outside, whether waiting in line at the polls or just trying to enjoy a little Tuesday outdoors. The sunshine is going to stay in the forecast through the rest of the week. We'll stay mild through next Monday, and our next rain chance doesn't creep in until next week. Mostly clear tonight, sunshine expected for your Wednesday. Looking ahead to Thursday morning, we might have a few more clouds, but Thursday afternoon, we're back to the sun. Now, this rain chance develops early Monday morning. There's a slight chance, and then we have a better opportunity for showers for Monday, Tuesday, and into early Wednesday. That rainfall should stay pretty steady. Overall accumulation total is generally between about 1 inch to 2 inches right now. Still a little far out to nail down those exact numbers, but after a dry stretch, it'll be nice to have a little bit of rain in the area. Tomorrow, mostly sunny and mild. We're back in the 60s and the mid 60s through the rest of the work week and into the weekend. Very, very comfortable for early November. And again, that rain chance starting to develop for early next week.
All right. Thank you very much, Dana Fulton. And here in Wisconsin, we're keeping an eye on the state legislature as well, of course, where several seats are up for grabs today.
We are specifically watching the makeup of the legislature and whether Democrats can flip any seats. Amanda Quintana is following this for us outside of the Capitol. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, yes, well, obviously everyone is paying close attention to the presidential race tonight, but what happens in the Capitol here could impact you more than what happens in Washington. So there are about a dozen races that they're paying really close attention to tonight that Democrats could flip here in the state legislature. Now that's really important because in the last 10 years, we've only seen that happen once. So we're watching to see if Democrats can do that again, and if so, how many seats they can flip.
Some Democrats are hoping that they can indeed get to 14. I've heard some people saying that they thought 15 seats were a possibility. That might be too optimistic, but in any case, if they can get closer to the majority, that's obviously going to be much better than where they are now, where even though in statewide elections, there are more people who vote for Democrats than Republicans, the Republicans have got over, almost 2/3 of the seats in the assembly. So we are the most gerrymandered state in the country.
And that gerrymandering happened the last time there was redistricting. That was about 10 years ago. And of course, it's going to happen again. It happens every 10 years. And that's going to be based on the 2020 census. So whoever is elected tonight will be part of that process of redistricting. So that's really what's at stake here tonight. Another thing that we're going to have to see how it all plays out is how having more Democrats in the state legislature could impact the way that the state is responding to coronavirus. We know that a lot of the guidelines that Governor Evers tried to put into place were really fought by Republicans. So we'll see if having a different state legislature could affect that as well.
Amanda Quintana, live at the Capitol. Amanda, thank you.
And here's a look at some more races from tonight, and we'll be right back.
You are watching continuing coverage of election 2020 right now on News 3 Now. Here's a look at the latest presidential numbers in the Badger State. The president trying to get a repeat victory from 2016 with 63% of precincts reporting he leads his challenger, Joe Biden, by about 69,000 votes at this time. Again, 63% of precincts reporting. Clerks across the state have been hard at work all day counting those absentee ballots and coordinating in-person voting.
And in Madison, things went very smooth today. Madeline O'Neill is live in Madison with an update on how the count is going so far. Maddie?
Sorry, guys. Hopefully you can hear me now. So what I was saying is we don't have final election turnout numbers yet, but we will get that in a couple hours after all the poll inspectors behind me here drop off their election material. But as of 6 p.m., that number was sitting at 82%. That's already setting a record here in Madison for voter turnout for a presidential election. It's not quite up to 93%, which we saw in November of 2018. But again, that was as of 6 p.m., still plenty of time for that number to go up. Of course, that includes absentee ballots, more than 128,000 of them, which have been counted throughout the day. They were mostly counted by the time that polls closed at 8 p.m. The city clerk credits that because of a large number of poll workers who were there to physically process the ballots, more than 5,000 this year in comparison to previous presidential elections. Of those 5,000, nearly 4,000 were new. Now we're starting to see results trickle in on Dane County's website. I touched base with the Dane County clerk earlier today. He said some communities were having an easier time with absentee ballots than others, but he still expects most results to be up by tonight. He also said he thought overall things went really smoothly here in Dane County.
All right, Maddie O'Neill reporting live. Maddie, thank you.
Brady Mallory is keeping an eye on results throughout the night for us as well. Brady, what are the other races you're following?
Well, hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. Tonight's not just about choosing political leaders. It's also about shaping the future of schools. And we've seen that in the Madison Metropolitan School District. 80% of voters have said yes to a $317 million referendum, and this will help on some building projects to do some updates and for a new elementary school. And with that, we also have a referendum asking voters to extend levy limits. So that's $33 million over 4 years. Voters also said yes to that. And as Eric had pointed out earlier, these two kind of go hand in hand. There are a lot of races in the state where we are seeing some pretty pronounced leads, but here are some closer ones that we've been watching. We have the U.S. Congress District 3. Derek Van Orden has 50% of the vote, and Ron Kind also has 50%. But if you look, it breaks down to, about 400 votes. And now we're in Wisconsin Assembly District 43. Don Vruwink, 54%. Slight lead over Beth Drew, 46%. We have 66% of the precincts reporting. So that's how some of the local races are shaking out tonight here in Wisconsin. Back to you, Eric and Charlotte.
All right, Brady, thank you very much. Now stay with us. We're going to continue our coverage on News 3 Now at 10 in just a few minutes. And after the 10 o'clock, we'll be streaming again at channel3000.com and on our Channel 3000 Plus app. Thanks for joining us on this election night in America.
We have a lot to get to tonight with team coverage scattered across southern Wisconsin. The biggest race on the ballot tonight is for president.
Now, these are the numbers in Wisconsin. 64% of precincts reporting Donald Trump with a lead over Joe Biden right now, 51 to 47%. Important to note, once again,